Good afternoon. Hello, everyone. Ooh, it got quiet really fast. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you. Good afternoon. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. We have, I think, more people trickling in, but we want to stay on time and get our program going. Welcome to All In Together's We the Leaders Summit, and happy Diwali to all who may be celebrating. I think there's a bunch of New York City parents who might not so much be celebrating an extra day off from school, but you know, it's a beautiful holiday that celebrates light and joy, and we are very happy to be here on such a beautiful, auspicious day. I'm Lauren Leader. I am co-founder and CEO of All In Together, and we are thrilled to be here at the Ford Foundation for Social Justice for a very special afternoon program that really embodies the mission and vision of All In Together, which is to educate and empower women to be leaders in every domain and discipline. Today's program was made possible by an amazing group of sponsors and board companies, including Airbnb, Bloomberg, Charter, Merck, Wiley, which may win for the most employees here, right? I think they did. They usually do. Sorry, I don't want to make it competitive, but they usually really do show up. So I had to just shout out our friends at Wiley, although we love all of our supporters, and the Omidyar Network. These are all organizations that have been with us for many years and are deeply, deeply invested in our work. One of the wonderful things about today's program is you're also going to meet a number of the All In Together board members who will be moderating a number of our conversations. We also do want to say a very special thank you to the staff at the Ford Foundation for Social Justice for hosting us in this absolutely amazing space. Have you seen the art in this building? It's absolutely astonishing. If you have a chance, our reception will be upstairs, after which I'll tell you about in a little while. You'll get a chance to look around this extraordinary building. I don't know if there's any big art geeks in the building today, but I was absolutely freaking out that there is a full-size Kehinde Wiley portrait in the lobby upstairs right by the security desk, and if you haven't seen it, it's pretty spectacular. So poke around, the building's so gorgeous. One thing I should just mention, logistically, I have mine on my phone case. Do hang on to your yellow stickers. There is quite a lot of security in this building, and so if you will be coming and going, you need to have it on your person. It doesn't have to be on you, on your clothes, but as long as you have it with you, do please hang on to your badge so that you can get around the building this afternoon. But this is an incredible venue, and we're very blessed that the Ford Foundation welcomed us and allowed us to be here. It is becoming a real gathering spot for many nonprofits in the New York City area, and it's just extraordinary to get this kind of support from them. So since our founding now 11 years ago in 2014, All In Together has worked tirelessly to support women across America to reach their full potential as leaders. Our programs have reached and inspired thousands of women to take steps towards action. They have advocated for and made change on the issues that matter most to them, ranging from women's health equity, which we'll be talking about today, food security, domestic violence prevention, childcare, housing, safety, and more. All of the proceeds from today's program go to support our grassroots programs in communities across America that really reach a pretty significant group of underserved women in what we call civic deserts, places where women are profoundly underrepresented in their local communities and where their voices and their experiences are as essential as they could possibly be. Today, we continue that journey with important and timely conversations on leadership in healthcare, housing, politics, and yes, even Broadway. It is New York, after all. So that was a point of personal privilege. I really just wanted us to talk about theater. So we have an amazing group of theater producers coming later this afternoon, which will be so fun. But we hope you come away feeling inspired to be a change maker yourself at a time when so many people feel discouraged by the scale of the challenges that we face Even small actions really can be significant. Even, yes, incremental change matters and can make a difference. So just a quick word about All In Together for those of you who may not know us as well. We are strictly nonpartisan. We are a 501c3, and we do not take political positions or endorse candidates. We have always been proud to include and foster diverse perspectives, and today's program reflects that. Now, we will have quite a few women leaders from New York State politics, and as you know, most of them are part of one political party because that is very much how New York State is represented. But we encourage diverse dialogue and diverse viewpoints. We will foster respectful conversation in this room. I know you will all be part of that. And one thing to note that many of our conversations will include Q&A, and I really would encourage you all to participate and ask your questions when the opportunities come up. You also can join us on social media, on Instagram and LinkedIn, right? Is that right? Am I getting that right? I'm looking at my social team because, as you guys can tell, I'm too old to actually know that answer. I have to look at the 25-year-old who runs our social to get that answer. Our goals for today are really to create connection among the people in this room. And we've intentionally included a mid-program break and a very lovely reception after that you should really stay for, even though I know we're all busy, so that you can really spend time with each other. It is an exceptional gathering of people, and I hope you'll make a commitment to meet and talk to people you don't know. I saw a bunch of people doing that before we started. So, whenever we have a chance, introduce yourself to someone you don't know next to you. So a couple points of just organization. The program for today, there is an agenda on your chair, but the full program, which has speaker bios, can be found through the QR code on the screen and on your chairs. You can read the full bios of our amazing speakers. So with that, I think we're going to start. So our first conversation starts by centering on the vast pace of change in our workplaces over the last number of years, maybe especially since COVID. But I think we all appreciate that in most of our professional lifetimes, a lot has changed very quickly. And the HR leaders, the heads of talent and human resources and people, are really at the front lines of those rapidly changing, incredibly, in some cases, innovative and often very challenging issues facing the workforce today. So to help us navigate those issues are three leaders with absolutely amazing perspective. I've had an opportunity to work with most of them. And we will have Q&A for this conversation, if they're up for it, right, ladies? Okay. So moderating the conversation, and you can come up, is All In Together Vice Chair of our board and Wiley Vice President of Human Resources, Danielle Mcmahan. And she is joined by my friend and colleague, Sarah Gretzco from PayPal, and Nancy Hall from FISERV, and if I don't say it, she will. So yes, it is FISERV, not the one with the P that makes the vaccines, but this happens like literally every day to her. Is that so frustrating? Poor thing. She has to tell everybody that all the time. But anyway, the amazing fintech company that has been a great supporter of All In Together. So please join me in welcoming this great group.
Thank you, Lauren. All right, so let's get started. We have a very popular topic today. And I thought, Nancy, I would start with you with our first question, which is, how has the workplace changed since the pandemic, and what trends are you seeing and watching most closely?
So probably the biggest thing that I've seen is the remote work. Before the pandemic, it was really an exception, and now it's an expectation. So really trying to find that balance and being home full-time during the pandemic and coming back to the office, a lot of companies are struggling to find that balance. That's probably the biggest single thing. Some of the other trends that I've seen is more focus on employee well-being. I think the one thing that the pandemic taught all of us is that mental health is really important. But I also think this being with people and socializing with people is also just as important. So I do think coming back into the office to get that setting, being with other people is just as important as the flexibility.
Thank you. Sarah?
I would agree with those. I think those are the main ones we're seeing as well. So I don't even like to call it return to office anymore, but these different ways of working and models, I think are in one ways offering an opportunity for how you think about talent and where you can get that talent, which is very positive. I think on the other end, it's causing some challenges just from a culture and collaboration perspective. And so thinking through how even with these models, and part of the challenge with the hybrid, right, is that everyone's kind of on their own version of hybrid, and there's not even consistencies in communities in general, right? Companies have different, we were just talking about that earlier, so companies have different policies, and I think that is impacting just communities overall, and not being able to have that sense of community. And then well-being, for sure, we're seeing. I think the world just feels really heavy right now. And when you realize that you spend most of your time at work, a lot of these feelings, reacting to the latest news, what's going on even outside of your own organization, I think is really taxing. And I think we're especially noticing that with some of our younger employees, where this might be their first job or one of their firsts coming into the workplace and trying to manage that. And I think that's very challenging.
Yeah, that's a great point. At Wiley, we've been talking about this concept of convening. That we also say, why are we still calling it return to office? I mean, that was so a couple years ago. So 2021. And for us, it's how do we bring people together to convene? Regardless of your status, if you're office-based or remote, we have about 30% of our population that continues to be remote. And we have recently brought our colleagues, our office-based colleagues, back to the office 3 days a week. You can imagine that was incredibly unpopular because we were 8 days a month before that. And so we've really slow-rolled our return to office. But this concept of convening and building back that social community, that connection back to the office. I'm curious because I do have so many Wiley colleagues here. Can I get a little shout out for those Wiley? Ooh, yeah, really representing. What is your policy around return to office? Like, how many days are you guys back in the office?
You go first, because then I'll sound like a hero.
You will.
No. I have Wiley employees here. You can't be the hero.
So we're a fintech financial company. So our philosophy is we want to match the energy of our customers, and a lot of our customers are banks. We support a lot of entrepreneurs and businesses that were in the office or working all throughout the pandemic in their establishment. So we are a 5-day-a-week in the office company. Now we do offer flexibility, and I think those are some of the things that we're working on now, right? There's a balance to everything in life, moderation to everything. So I see, even this year it's changed, where it was a strict 5 days in the week, and then now we have some flexibility back into that, where we can flex our schedule to be more aligned with people's personal schedules.
And we actually sound like Wiley at PayPal. We are, for the most part, 3 days. We have some exceptions for space constraints, but we also do have some of our population, when people were coming back to the office, if they lived a certain distance away, were able to be remote. So we have that same challenge that you have around a group of people who comes in regularly 2 or 3 days a week, primarily 3. But then we do have a population of people that are not going into any office. And that's challenging in a lot of ways, because as you talk about convening, building a sense of community, belonging, we do see differences in those folks from an engagement perspective. And I think there's fears as people came back to the offices, well, does that mean I don't get as many opportunities because I'm not here? So I think trying to figure out how you manage across that is challenging.
I do think one of the things about coming back to the office, you talk about opportunities. I do think, especially if you're earlier in your career, meeting people in person and making that personal connection is important. That doesn't mean you have to be in the office every day, but making that effort, if you are remote, to at least come in and that face-to-face. It does accelerate the relationships. So I wouldn't discount it, especially if you're 100% work from home. I would encourage to make the time to at least come in a couple days just for the interpersonal action.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, which is why we talk about convening versus being office-based or remote or hybrid.
I like that. I'm going to steal that convening word.
That's great, as long as you just give Wiley credit.
You got it.
It's good for our brand. So the reason why convening is important is even if you're a remote status at Wiley, we still encourage you to come to the office. So every remote colleague at Wiley received a badge. And the idea being that you could go to any office anytime, and if your team is coming together, we would ask that you convene and collaborate. So regardless of your status of office, remote is a location, but it's not like the end destination. So that's kind of how we think about it. The other trend that we're seeing, and we've had a lot of conversation, as I'm sure you guys have as well, I know you have, because we talked about it, is AI. And the other trend post the pandemic and in this current world is around AI and the flow of work and how you start integrating it. So I'm curious what you're seeing, how AI is impacting your future of work, and any concerns about industries or jobs changing. That's always what we're hearing from our colleagues. Would love to get your perspective. Sarah, you want to go first?
Yeah, I'm happy to go first. So I think absolutely it's changing jobs and it's changing organizations. This is a personal opinion, not a PayPal opinion. I think some of what we're hearing in the media might be a little overhyped around exactly what it's going to do and not do. But I think it's going to fundamentally change how we work, for sure. And there are some types of tasks that we know that the AI can probably do better. And by the way, we don't need to have a person, a human, actually doing that. But I will say, having been in this space for a long time, we've been looking at all of that as other technologies have come out even before AI. So there was, a big push for automation, probably 10, 15 years ago. And a lot of companies were looking at how they could automate and move work around. So I think AI is going to be similar, where it will probably fundamentally change some jobs, meaning you might not need a person to do that. But I think for the most part, at least what we're seeing at PayPal, is it's augmenting what our people can actually do, and to what quality they can actually do it. I think one of the challenges organizations have now is with the proliferation of so many AI tools, which ones, number one, do you adopt, and how do you actually help that adoption across the organization in a thoughtful way, right? So we're all in the people HR space. Like we need to have set guidelines and principles that we need our people to adopt, so they're not putting sensitive information in those tools or using it in a way that we're not allowed to use it. And I think that's the bigger challenge, because it's just happened so quickly. So it's, the tools are out there, you want people using them because that's how you learn, but you have to do it in a safe and secure way.
I think our jobs are going to change to be called the Chief AI Adoption Officers from Human Resources.
Yes.
What about you, Nancy? What are you seeing at Fiserv?
So my background, unlike my partners here are both HR, my background is all IT, and I've been in IT for longer than I want to admit, so I've seen a lot of changes in technology. And we talk about AI as the next transformative technology. When you think about when personal computers came on the market, then it was the internet, then it was the cell phone. And you hear a lot of the same things. Oh, we're gonna lose our jobs, we're gonna this. I don't think AI is gonna make jobs vanish overnight, but I do think it will force a lot of the sectors and businesses to really reimagine and look at how they work and incorporating AI. Just like they did in the internet. Think about it, if you're a company saying, oh, internet's gonna take our jobs, we're not adopting it, where would you be today as a company, right? So each new technology has that level. I've seen it over and over again. There's a level of fear because there's an unknown. What's it gonna do? How is it gonna change? Yes, it's gonna change stuff. Life, every day, life changes everything, not just technology. So I think for companies, it's about, very similar to what Sarah was saying, is how do we adopt it? Where does it make sense for us, for our company, your company, everybody's individually, and then using it responsibly. and making sure you have the right governance in place. And I think if you do those things, it'll become a really good partner in helping people accelerate the pace of work, which in today's world, I know I can use it, I could use all the help I can get. So we'll find AI will have a really significant role in how we work in the future.
And I think one of my biggest fears is that people are just accepting without any diligence that what the tools are telling them is correct. And I will tell you from my personal experience, I put my son's math worksheet into ChatGPT to try to help me correct it because 7th grade math is beyond my capability right now. And it actually got a number of them wrong. And I thought like a math worksheet of anything, it would
It's
like,
bad with numbers.
yeah. It was like, and it was like order of operation. I'm like, this isn't that. And I was like, this thing, I'm smarter than ChatGPT at.
And that's it. Like you have to look, not to get too technical, but you have to look at it like it's the same as the internet. When you just Google something, you don't say, oh my gosh, it gives you guidance, it gives you information, but you don't take it for gospel. And it's the same way with AI, right? And it'll get better, it'll get smarter, but I agree with that 100%. We try to tell people, use it as like a partner, someone to throw ideas off of. We input, we do a lot with AI, obviously, in our company, and it's really fascinating, the results. And you're right, it's not always accurate.
I love the analogy that it's like having an intern. So think about if you have an intern, right? There's the answer right there, and you give them a project, you wouldn't just take that project and flip it over to your CEO. Right? You would spend time coaching and asking follow-up questions. You'd probably edit it. You might give it to someone else on your team. You would be mentoring them. You'd let them take the first pass. I think of it as a first pass. I was listening to a podcast the other day, the Daily Morning Brew, and they had this very funny thing that you just reminded me of. They call it work slop, and they're like, colleagues are producing a lot of work slop. They're going into AI, they're asking it a question, they're taking that answer and they're forwarding it around, and I'm getting all this slop in my inbox. So don't be a work slop person, I think was the takeaway, but it's very funny because it reinforced what you just said. At Wiley, we're also focused on the guardrails, but very intrigued by making these a set of safe tools for our colleagues. And yes, it increases productivity, but also want to unleash them to help us understand how these tools can be used. So setting some guardrails in terms of the information and making sure we set up the right structures and the infrastructure, but then really letting them go off and be free to play. So we talk a lot about let them play, and our colleagues are surprising us every day in terms of the things that they're coming up with in terms of driving productivity. Which brings me to our next question. This has caused us to start to talk about future jobs and careers and skills. Skills is a big hot topic right now across HR. And I've always said that, people don't have linear careers anymore. I think people collect experiences. I've always said that. And so we need to be thinking about what are the skills we need our colleagues and ourselves to have. Like what kinds of skills can we help people collect? And at Wiley, before the whole AI thing jumped off, we had a marketplace where we have managers, they can post a job. I have a project, and here are the skills that you're going to acquire by doing this project. So it gave the manager more capacity, but it also armed our colleagues with the ability to go and get the skills that they needed and try something new, learn about a different part of the organization. It's been very popular. But what are when you think about skills, what are the skills in your organization, those future skills that you think people need to be thinking about acquiring and adopting to be successful?
So I think it's a great question, number one. And when you really think about everything that we've been through in the last few years, there's been a few shifts in the workplace, and I think one of them is being more customer-centric. And I think along with the technology, AI, I think there's a digital fluency that people need to pay attention to because things are moving very quickly. Being adaptable, always wanting to learn. And then I think the biggest thing, because we're shifting, things that I think we're shifting to see is more from a task-based to more of an outcomes-based, which implies a level of accountability, especially if we're having flexible working, that combination that you as an employee need to be accountable Just because someone's not sitting next to you to do it, you know you need to do it and do it well and do it right. And then finally, and something I think we'll touch on a little bit, like I think, everybody needs, especially in the political climate ever changing, having DEI transparency, just keeping that as part of who you are. Because I do think that the diversity in thought is what makes us stronger. So I think those are the 5 things I could think of.
I would say, number one, I think on the adoption side, in order to be able to adopt AI, I think we need people who have learning agility, and I think that's going to continue, in the future, because things we know just keep changing very quickly. So really instilling in that learning agility in people to try, experiment, the growth mindset. It kind of all comes back to that, and I think that will increase in importance. And then I think because we'll have the power that we will in some of these AI tools, that the skills that are actually going to become most important are the ones that we used to call the softer professional ones, not as sexy technical skills that we would pay a lot of money to train people up on. So I think it's, going back to AI as an assistant or an intern, it's the things that the AI can't do. So creativity, critical thinking, knowing if it's work slop, knowing when to interrogate, being thoughtful about thinking about using the AI appropriately. And so, creativity, critical thinking, emotional intelligence, really it's the stuff that AI can't do. Because what I don't think any of us saw coming with this change is how this technology was going to upheaval the technology skills that people need. We convinced a whole generation of children to go into software engineering and coding, and many of them are graduating now and looking around and have no jobs.
Yeah, but with the AI, because we do obviously a lot of hiring for technical, and I'll be honest with you, I will interview for a certain level of tech, but it's really more about what they can learn from a tech. What's more important to me is their adaptability, their work ethic, their accountability, their view. That I can't teach that stuff, right? And so I'm more willing to hire for those qualities than technical. As long as I can sense that they can learn and they're willing to learn, I can teach the tech.
Yeah, I would add one more. So I heard the learning agility, critical thinking. Something that we've been talking about is resilience.
That's a good one.
Because there's so much change. Change is going to be ever present. Like change is never going to stop. But how do you build a resilient workforce? And we haven't cracked the nut, but it's a conversation that we're having in our org. So last question, and then we'll turn it over to Q&A, is given the rollback of DE&I in many places, how do we continue to ensure a true meritocracy? Nancy, you started to talk about it. Do you want to go first, Sarah?
Sure. So I think there's a lot that's happening in the media that, at least in my experience, is not what's happening at all companies across the globe. I will say that I think the current political environment is very triggering for organizations to take a look at, and we did that at PayPal. We did an audit just to make sure we felt comfortable with what we were doing. But I actually think if I try to take the positive spin of everything that's happening, what I think this has done is actually raise the awareness that DE&I can't be either somebody's side job, it can't be a dedicated team of people that's all that they do. It actually has to be embedded in your organizational systems and processes and culture. And that's been the big focus that we've had at PayPal for me on the talent side, is how do we embed that into our broader talent system? Because once you get it embedded in the system, then it just runs. And I think what a lot of companies had before was they would have efforts or initiatives or a group of people who were tasked with doing that, but it was like an uphill battle because everything in the organization was working against that. And so it has really changed our conversation to, number one, put it in place in our systems, But number two is also the accountability. So for anyone who is we call them people leader, but a manager at PayPal, you have a goal every year, a people leader goal. And in that goal, it explicitly states that we're expecting people to show up in a certain way, and that people leaders are accountable for ensuring that we have an inclusive environment for people to, do their best work. And those are the things that I think is what organizations need to focus on. Now, in all honesty, and having been in this space for a long time, I think what is disappointing is all of the stuff that I think organizations have done over years and years and years, in a lot of places hasn't moved the needle as much as we would like to. So and again, this is my optimistic view, is by taking kind of this more holistic view, will we actually see some of the changes that, even myself, when, you look at these different reports that come out year after year, the progress is slow at best for some of these underrepresented populations.
Agreed.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's been interesting. I would agree that's a great word for it. And I guess there's really looking at it from two lenses, right? So having seen the progression of DEI over the years and really putting those programs in place to help companies make that transition. And when we had the political changes recently, it was almost in my mind, I thought, oh gosh, okay, we took the training wheels off, right? And some companies did really well in embedding it in their culture, and they didn't miss a beat. And that's what we experienced at our company, which is really great to see. Some companies not so much. So I think it's up to each company to keep it at the front of the mind. As leaders, we have to be champions of DEI, whether our company has an official program or not. I think we all owe it to ourselves and each other just to make it part of who we are. And I firmly believe that having that diversity within your organization really does make you a stronger organization, stronger team. But I also believe that it should be based on merit too, right? But everybody should get an opportunity at that if you're qualified, and then picking the most qualified person regardless of who you are. But I think that it's being, as leaders, and we're all leaders in this room, we're here today, continuing to champion it is very important.
Thank you. Thank you for this discussion. I'm going to turn it over to Q&A. We have a mic in the back. Please don't be shy. And you can ask anything. It doesn't even have to be, of course, Devin has a question. This is like a town hall for me at Wiley.
Hi, thank you guys for that wonderful session. Danielle knows I always ask questions, so as you were talking, you mentioned learning agility, and that really resonated with me, and I was wondering, as it pertains to AI, how do you guys help your colleagues become more learning agile using AI? Because it could do a lot, but for specific roles, some people aren't necessarily able to figure out how to implement it and make it work for them to be that time saver.
Yeah, that's a great question. And we've had a lot of discussions. So part of my job is end user computing, so I'm responsible for all technologies to every employee within the organization. So this is a conversation we've had lots of discussions on. And we're also fintech, so 30% of our employees are developers. So we have like a big population of people who are deeply technical. They tend to pick it up themselves and learn at their pace. So we've partnered with Microsoft, and we recently just rolled out Copilot Chat across our organization because we really feel that that's a good, relevant way to get everybody involved in AI because it's integrated with Office. And we have great partners. Matter of fact, we're having our first tech fair tomorrow where we're kicking off a lot of training. We've had online sessions that we've trained over, 500 people already. And just bringing it to everybody, getting closer to our customer, talking with people, and trying to meet people where they are, and recognizing that everybody learns at a different pace, they're at a different position within the company, so we try to offer it across. Just like everything, there's no one tool that fits all, so you got to keep having the conversations and adjusting as you go.
And I would just add quickly, I think on learning agility, I think having different options for people is key because I think people do learn differently. The other thing to know is that you can increase your learning agility And so there are prompts, and we're trying to do this with some of our AI adoption, where we're kind of encouraging people to use it in different ways based on their job. So for somebody who, again, it might not be second nature, giving them some ideas and prompts to get them thinking, and then it's just the experimentation. So we're really trying to push you guys, like, use the tools every day, because people thought they just needed to like sign up for them, and then we looked at usage and we're like, oh, they signed up and they never went back. So it's just even silly things like your son's math homework, put in, see what it gives you.
It's a great travel planning tool as well, if you haven't tried it for that. We also we gave everyone Copilot last year, and then we have a selection of 3 to 4 other tools that we use depending on your role. And we look very closely at utilization. If you don't use one of those special tools, we take the license back and we deploy it to someone else, and we have a waiting list. And then we have all different forums for training.
That's very cutthroat. I might steal that one too.
Well, you know, there's a big queue for wanting them, so you sign up for it, you don't use it, you're out. And we believe in letting them play, so really encouraging people to use it and share the prompts. So we have a prompt library. We have a whole colleague resource group around this where they're sharing all the prompts that they're using, the different things that they're trying, the successes they're having, the failures they may be having. And to your point, everyone learns differently. So sometimes there's a class, we have open door sessions. So we've been trying lots of different things, and if anyone has more ideas, we'd love to hear them because we're all learning together. But I know we have another question. So, we have 2 more. Go ahead.
Thank you very much for this engaging panel. Knowing that the nature of work has various elements of productivity, which when it comes to AI is more dependent on a computer and action, and then there's an aspect of work where it's more about collaboration and more in our humanity and social aspects. So if you could speak to some of the innovations that you're working on to counterbalance that paradox of the nature of AI in a technological world when you need that social interaction, and if we're always on the computer, how do we build that engagement?
Yeah, it's a great question. I can share some examples. So one of the things we're doing on our leadership development side is we, like many companies, during COVID, moved a lot of our development opportunities to virtual. We had to, right? Necessity. But it saved a lot of money because people weren't traveling around and weren't bringing people together. And so it kind of stayed a bit even after folks were, we weren't kind of in that nobody can travel thing. And what we realized was that we were missing something. We weren't convening. And there was, especially on the leadership development side, because that's some of the humanity you talked about, that stuff is harder to do virtually. And so we have shifted, and much of our leadership development is now back in person. And it is more costly, right? We're bringing people together. Lauren knows this because she's helping with some of that. But we decided to make the investment because we thought it was important. So I think it's thinking about being thoughtful about when you want to bring people together and making the investment there, because you know that that's actually where you'll get the value out of them building some of those human-centric skills.
Yeah, we're very similar too. Again, going around the flexibility, when the virtual, we add a lot of tech in to help make it more interactive, right? So a lot of our rooms have like digital whiteboards, or, we're leveraging technology in a way that kind of brings everybody closer to have that collaboration. But to Sarah's point, nothing really beats being in person. So we choose wisely when we bring people together, especially when we're kicking off initiatives, larger initiatives. We want people in the same room. We encourage teams to meet on site at least once or twice a year, to have like their off-site meetings, to really drive leadership discussions. It's just better in person in some levels. Regarding AI, what I would highly recommend, instead of doing hackathons, do promptathons. Bring people together, make it fun, share ideas in a room. It's a great way to really accelerate.
One last question.
Yeah, so I'm sitting next to a high school student who I leaned over and I said, do you know what they're talking about? And I was just curious, what are the 1 to 3 things that you would tell a high schooler about the future of work and the things that she should be considering as she looks at college?
That's a great question. Yeah, that's a great question. We do a lot of work with interns and college students, and what I tell people is curiosity, ask questions, be vocal, and communication are probably the networking, communication, and curiosity are probably the three biggest things, especially for somebody starting out in their career or trying to figure out where they are. Don't be shy, ask the question, talk to everybody, and learn how to communicate. A lot of people don't know how to articulate their ideas. They don't know how to talk across or talk up, and that's really important too. Especially at this stage, you could do anything at this point. So don't be afraid to ask the questions. Don't be afraid to jump in. You may not like it, and sometimes that's just as important as finding what you do like.
Yeah, I'll double down on the communication. I think that's really key. And I think, there's a lot of feedback coming in that with generations like yourself, and it sounds like many of you in the room that were digital first, that's some of the skills that are lacking when individuals graduate from high school, graduate from college. So I think, some of that, it's really the social intelligence of how you interact with different types of people from different walks of life, different generations, et cetera. I think critically important. Curiosity, for sure. I actually listened to this podcast the other day, and it was about, they had someone on there, a 25-year-old saying, I think they just graduated from college, and whatever field that they had studied, they started a job there and then decided that wasn't for them. But they asked this question to the podcaster of I feel like it's too late for me to change because I just invested 4 years in college, and if I wait another 4 years, then I'm gonna be 30. And it was really interesting. The podcaster's answer to that question was, well, you're gonna be 30 anyway. So do you wanna be 30 doing something you actually wanna do and you're passionate about, or do you wanna be 30 thinking about what you should have done 5 years ago?
I love that. So with that, I'm going to close the panel and say thank you so much to our panelists. Thank you.
Thank you, Danielle.
Yes, super fun.
I love that. And just do a quick picture, though, for our photographer before you get off. I love this. What I'm thinking about the things that I just took away from this. Isn't it interesting that you go into a conversation thinking you're going to talk about all the tech skills that you need at this time where there's all this transformation, and then you have 3 HR executives saying that actually the thing you really need is to know how to speak and to be curious and to ask good questions. Isn't that fascinating? I feel very seen. I feel very seen because my tech skills are not so great. We have a lot of students here, actually. If you are a current student, I know we have kids from the new school. Where's the new school? Where are my new school friends? Awesome. I think we have a bunch of girls from Girls Who Invest who are here. Where's our Girls Who Invest? Amazing. We have some high school and other colleges. I think Columbia. We're going to have a bunch of Columbia people in the house, too, a little later. So it's and then we have lots of professionals in the room. So it's a very, very diverse room, and I love that. It brings me so much joy to see all of you here today. The other thing that I thought was I'm totally going to go try to do my daughter's math homework on ChatGPT. But my team sent me a really fascinating study not long ago that showed that actually AI adoption, meaning just even light experimentation with AI, is much lower among women. And it really struck me, and so it's actually compelled me to try things. What's really interesting about the math homework being wrong is that actually I have found that also a lot of the political information is wrong. And it's an issue that we are trying to address. In fact, one of our next big forums is an AI innovation summit that we'll be doing in Washington, D.C. in November. So if you'll be around, please join us. But it's really interesting because I started trying to do some writing around politics using ChatGPT just to play with it. And a lot of the information about who's in elected office was out of date. And if I didn't know that Jay Inslee was no longer the governor of the state of Washington, I might have written an op-ed that had completely wrong information. So I thought that was really fascinating that at the same time that we need to start working with these tools, that kind of gut check and really being well-informed matters enormously. So we're going to shift gears from the workplace to the home front. And I know that everyone in this room, I think we have everyone here. Is Councilwoman Narcisse here? Great. Okay, I'm getting the nod that we can move forward. We are rushing her down the stairs. We're really happy you're here. The workplace is one element of our lives, but I know that everyone in this room is incredibly conscious of the fact that New York City is among one of the most expensive places in the world to live. And that challenge, the housing challenge, that affordability challenge of New York has been incredibly stubborn. I mean, I've now lived in New York for over 30 years. You know, what I thought were the expensive rents when I first moved here, you know, you wish you could find a studio apartment for what I paid for my 2-bedroom in the early 90s. But the reality for so many people who want to live and make their lives in this city is that it's a real challenge that we cope with every day. So we wanted to have a conversation about solutions. And we're so pleased that Airbnb has joined the board of All In Together, and our dear friend Janaye Ingram, who is the director of community partner programs and engagement at Airbnb, is gonna lead this conversation. She also has her like insanely adorable 5-year-old with her. Where is she? Oh, she's hiding. I think she might be, it's okay, she's so cute, you really should take a picture with her. We have a 6-year-old coming later, we're gonna get them together. Anyway, so, because we're just that kind of an organization. So she is joined, we're so thrilled, this is gonna be such a good conversation. She is joined by City Council member Mercedes Narcisse and Tonya Ores, who's CEO of Neighborhood Housing Services in New York. Please welcome them. I think this is timely and important.
Thank you, Lauren. And good afternoon, everyone. It's great to see this audience, and especially knowing there are students here of varying ages, including my little daughter who's here, along with my mom and my cousin. But it is great to be with you all here at the Ford Center for Social Justice. And we're excited about this conversation that we're going to have today. And I want to thank Lauren again and the All In Together team for all of the amazing work that you put into producing this type of event and having these types of conversations that are really critically important, especially now. Your leadership, Lauren, particularly, continues to open the doors for dialogue and building community. And that is something that is vitally important. I want to just give a little bit more information about myself. As was mentioned, my name is Janaye Ingram. I'm the Director of Community Partner Programs and Engagement at Airbnb. But I have spent many years in my career, including now, focused and sort of prioritizing equity and fighting for issues and fighting for a community, including being one of the leaders of the 2017 Women's March. So witnessing lots of actions that have been happening recently has made me very happy. Needless to say, you know, part of my role here at Airbnb is to continue to engage community, to create conversations like these, and to be at the center of those conversations in order to help bring people together, which, again, we know we need now more than ever. At a time where it feels like there is so much that can distract us and pull us apart. Things like conversation is really what is going to bring us together. And so I'm grateful today to sit with these amazing women and to have a conversation about equity and entrepreneurship and housing. And I want to just acknowledge New York City Council member Mercedes Narcisse, who is here with us today. Please give it up for her. We're excited to be working with her, and I also want to acknowledge Tonya Ores, who is the President and CEO of Neighborhood Housing Services of New York City. And we have a really robust partnership with Tonya that we announced last month. And we're really gonna just sit here and have a great conversation with these two amazing leaders, and we will open it up at the end for some questions from the audience. But with that, I'm happy to dive in. And so I want to start with the big picture, why housing and equity are connected. And I'm going to ask this question to both of you, and feel free to answer. Housing is often described as the foundation for opportunity. And from your individual vantage points, whether it's City Hall or community work or partnerships, how do you see housing and economic mobility intersecting in New York today? And we'll start with the council member.
I was gonna let Tonya do that because Tonya is the expert on this, helping me out. She's always in my office. We do a lot of seminar. My office is an educational hub, and she has been very helpful to me. So I will let her go first.
Oh, okay, thank you. Hello, everyone. Hello, hello. Before I just answer your question, Janaye, I want to just let you know who NHS is. So Neighborhood Housing Services, we are a nonprofit housing organization. We are providing residents with the tools they need to buy their home, to keep their home, and to maintain their home. NHS New York City has partners throughout New York City. So in every borough, there's an NHS within the communities, and they're there to serve you, just in terms of being an experienced HUD-approved housing counselor, walking through the steps for affordable, decent housing. So we're very happy to be serving the community and part of this discussion. And the programs that we have individually meet the customer where they are. If you're not ready and you want to be ready in 5 years, we'll lay out a 5-year plan for you to become a homeowner in New York City. And if you're ready now, we'll evaluate it to see if you're ready. So, and we also have many programs and services that I'm pretty sure I will highlight through the discussion. But in terms of your question, Janaye, let me just get my little notes here. You talked about housing and economic mobility. I believe that housing is the foundation for opportunity, but education is definitely the bridge. And where you live shapes access to schools, to jobs, to safety, to health. Stable housing lets family build wealth. And when you build wealth, and you have a stable home and stable income, and you know what expenses are expected, you're allowed, or that enables you to save and to plan and to invest. And so that's very important. The instability keeps families stagnant and stuck. You're just living paycheck to paycheck. You're not gaining equity, and there's a uncertainty that you have, and you're not able to build and to plan around that. So at NHS, we connect housing with education and opportunity, from financial literacy to homeownership opportunities and property management training. Educated, empowered homeowners strengthens the economic mobility.
Absolutely. Councilmember?
Thank you, Tonya. So my name is Mercedes Narcisse. I'm the council member representing one of the largest districts in New York City, South Side of Brooklyn, starting from Canarsie, Flatland, Georgetown, Bergen Beach, Mill Basin, Mill Island, Marine Park, Garrison Beach, and Chipset Bay. Okay. Very diverse. And by the way, I'm the first Black woman, Haitian, to be elected. The thing is, housing is more than a shelter. Coming from a perspective as a registered nurse, I'm gonna say, without a housing, without a space for yourself, you cannot actually do anything about your health. Because you don't have a home, even the doctor discharged you from the hospital, or the nurse, like myself, you don't have a place to continue your health. And then we said, your health is wealth, right? So housing is more, is your dignity. It is the one thing you can attach to, say, I have my respect here. And you heard Tonya about education. How are you gonna go to school and when you don't have no home to go to study or to spend time? Your children, how are you gonna raise them? So it's more than that. We're talking about opportunity, and I'm hearing equity. That's one of the buzzwords that we all attach to. But if we don't create that space, if Black and brown communities, lower class, white, whatever the color that you are, if you don't have that, you're not really whole. We're talking about holistic. Housing make you whole. And so that's what I'm saying, the economic part, because for us in our community right now, we are losing our home. And if you said the wealth that we're creating, the equity to around economic, everything, if you don't have a home and you cannot hold your home, you will go for foreclosure, you cannot pay your bill. You have seen on TV, not too far from me, that a person lost their home because of $5,000 water bill. So this is real. This is economic we're talking about. And this is the wealth that the person tried to create all their lives. And they get to retirement age and they cannot hold that. So if you want me to be whole, you want me to have an opportunity, I have to have the option to take care of my home, to hold my home. And that's the option that I'm so grateful to partner with Talking Airbnb, to know that my folks can have that opportunity. Some of them need it. It's a lifeline for them. And that's what I will say. That's why economics tied together and education and everything.
Absolutely. I would also just offer, stable housing also creates that entrepreneurship pipeline. Whether it is you, the entrepreneur, and where you live, but also the entrepreneurs in the community. Having those people who have that stable housing and the businesses that surround them in the community, it creates that ecosystem. So echo everything that you both said.
Absolutely. I'm a businesswoman, by the way. I held several businesses in New York City, including DME and all this. And I own a small building that I try to create opportunity as well. So it is real. And if we talk about the equity, which I'm gonna keep on bringing that up. If we want to address that equity we're talking about, that called the entrepreneurship as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, Tonya, I'm gonna go back to you. NHS NYC has been on the front lines of housing stability for decades. What are you seeing right now in terms of homeowners and renters trying to stay rooted in their neighborhoods?
Homeowners, well, in general, and this is homeowners and renters, housing, New York City is definitely experiencing challenges in affordable housing. And many homeowners are paying more than 30% of their income towards housing. And this is not even including groceries and insurance and childcare, yes, all of these things. So it's an indicator that something is wrong. So what I'm seeing now, what we're seeing, NHS New York City alone, we receive 50,000, about a little over 50,000 requests for services per year. And these are for individuals who specifically looking for something to improve their housing situation. And we're seeing pressure with these homeowners. But what we're seeing that's different from the prior years, are they are really stepping up and looking for the resources. And they're trying to preserve and protect what they've built. And that's important. Homeowners are experiencing high repair costs, insurance, and maintenance challenges. And with NHS, we provide programs that target those things. So we're very happy about that. And renters, they're experiencing rising rents and shrinking affordability. People want to stay rooted. When you grow up in New York City, you know that you just want to stay with New York City. You want to live in the neighborhood that you grew up in, and you find any means necessary to stay there. That means sometimes they get into situations that they can't afford. They agree to pay a mortgage that they know they're not going to be able to maintain for 30 years. And the same with home ownership. So that's an issue. So we're seeing that, but again, we're seeing more and more individuals who's finding those resources to maintain home ownership. And with NHS, I also want to mention that 75%, or maybe even higher, of our requests for services are coming from women. So women head of household, single women. So give yourselves a hand. I just want to just do that. You know, women are definitely taking the bull by the horn and doing what they need to do.
That's important to hear, especially in this room. I want to come back, Councilmember, to talking about entrepreneurship. And you mentioned being a champion for small business and local empowerment. And I want to ask you, what role do you see entrepreneurship playing in strengthening communities? I want you to dig a little deeper on the point that we were just talking about, specifically for women, as this room is full of lots of women and some men allies, which we appreciate, but also people of color. We love the men in the room.
Small businesses, the rhetoric has been around, are the backbone of a community. And again, bringing back the word equity throughout New York City, we're not creating that opportunity. We're not exposing. That's the reason I'm so pleased and happy that I have a partner like Tonya and NHS, and I see Angela in there, always in my office. So it's trying to build people. And Black and brown folks, people that are less fortunate, have to be part of the equation. How we make our city thrive. You have folks that been in the community for decades and they price out. And if we have to build, we have to start from the bottom up. I know when I say bottom up, I get people scared. But if you don't start at the bottom to help people, to educate, building a business is not easy. That's why I have so many partners. It takes a lot of partners to bring New York City up. So I work closely with Brooklyn Chambers of Commerce. I work with organizations like NHS again to bring the educational structure to help one another. And when we say we are brothers and sisters keepers, that's part of it too. Because if we don't kind of strengthen our small businesses in our community, we're doing something wrong for the city of New York. And that's what I'm always engaged with folks and say, you want the information, let's get it together. And we need women to go out there. Don't give up. It's not easy. I know it's not easy, but don't give up. For instance, for myself, to start a business from scratch, it was not easy. But I was very persistent. That's why I'm using the space right now to make sure I uplift my sisters. Brothers, I love you too. But I had to, because single women raising kids. I used to be a single mom raising those kids and working as a nurse and trying to build a business, you know? So if it wasn't for the community, for resources, that's what I'm doing in the city council to make sure we allocating funding to make sure we strengthen our small business structure.
I love that. And I just want to double click on what you said about, making sure that when you take care of the most marginalized, everybody succeeds. And it's such an important point. I think oftentimes people sort of speak to one aspect of community, but when you focus on the most marginalized, everybody can win. Everybody can win. It is a win-win.
It is. I just want to add one thing. So what the council member said is extremely important. And to connect that to the housing part, one of the programs that NHS started a few years ago in Brooklyn was a property management program. So property management is not new, but we also noticed and realized that small homeowners were challenged, especially seniors, not being able to maintain their home. So we looked into property management, and that field alone is dominated by men in general. So we focused on women in property management and provided education to teach them how to become effective, successful property managers. And to take it a step further, we wanted to identify homeowners who were women head of households, and taught them how to see their homes as a business. How can you see your home as a business? And if you do that, you're able to generate additional income, use resources like an Airbnb, and also invest and make smart choices with the equity and the investment you have. So that program is successful, and especially in Brooklyn, and we have it now in every borough. So I'm very happy about that.
Yeah, it's a perfect transition because, I think many people may be saying, why is Airbnb having this kind of conversation? We think this is the right kind of conversation to have. And I think in particular at Airbnb, we see New Yorkers, teachers, retirees, single parents, like you, like myself, using their home as that economic lifeline. That helps keep them both rooted in their community, which I know we talked about earlier, but also creating that pathway to entrepreneurship. And so I want to maybe ask if you want to elaborate, Tonya, or Councilmember, if you want to talk a little bit about how you see this kind of entrepreneurship shaping the future of local economies, and particularly the economy here in New York City.
For me, Airbnb, for some folks of my district, is a lifeline for real. Because they have an apartment they cannot afford to hold, and they can rent out some of the part of their apartment or their house, and they can maintain their mortgage. Because right now, we have a crisis in New York City as we're sitting down here. Many folks that have small property owner, like my district, people will be renting their home and not paying them for 3-4 years. And they're in court, they cannot hold their home. And then they have another part, they wish they can have the Airbnb option where they can hold their house or their apartment. It's scary, but then again, it's a conversation we need to engage, because that's entrepreneurship as well, because the person looking for option. How many women that find the struggle, sometimes you don't know how you're gonna pay your bill? I know many of us have been there. So creating that entrepreneurship, creating that opportunity, creating that option is uplifting our community.
Absolutely. I don't know, Tonya, if you had anything else you wanted to add.
Just being innovative and just piggybacking on what all of us said. Home ownership or just generating additional income is going to definitely keep your home. Unfortunately, the economy is a wave, and sometimes we as practitioners see the problems before they even come in. We have individuals coming into our office saying, I am going to lose my home. I have no other source of income. What can I do? And if they have equity in their home, we're able to tap into that and help them into the next step. But some do not, and they don't have any other resources but to look at how could they make business from the property and the asset that they have. And that's the only resource that they have.
Absolutely. Well, before I do closing remarks, I noticed we are at time, so I'm gonna see, oh, what was that? Yeah, we have a couple more minutes for questions, if there are any. It looks like there are 2. I don't know if there are mic runners still in the room. And we have someone coming with the mic, and it looks like maybe one of our students has a question, so I'm excited for that one.
She came fast. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Alysia, and I go to North Star Academy in Newark, and I'm a part of the organization She Wins. And my question is, what advice would you give to young entrepreneurs who would want to start a business with limited resources? And what inspired you to start your business, and what challenges did you face at first?
Thank you for the question. It's not easy, but I can go back with my grandmother. Since I was like about 5 years old, getting involved with my grandmother, how she was organizing herself, how we had to travel miles sometimes. By the time I got here for high school, I started to sell clothes to my own classmates. I would go to Manhattan, I would organize. It's not easy, but you have to be persistent and consistent. And when you're in school to start your little business on the side, right now, I don't know if I'm in the right place to say it, you have to keep on pushing. And it's gonna be obstacle. By the time I have to put my DME together, I had no clue how to put, because I was in the ER, and I decided that I'm having children now, so I need to have the flexibility, so I'm gonna open my business. The first thing I did is, you have to do your research, and you have to open business that you passionate about. Then it become like you doing something, even it's hard, but your heart and soul is into it. Choose that business that you feel like that's the right business. And if you have to open a storefront or to be in a specific location, you have to get data. You have to see if your business is needed. You understand? Because you don't want to open a business and close in a few months. But most business, if you can make it out of 5 years, then you're good. So then you're good. But you're still gonna have obstacle, but you have to be creative. You have to bring things. You have to find your niche. What is it that the folks need in that area? And then be passionate about it. And now with the city council, we have so many women, over 34 women. We passionate about giving support to young folks that want to start their business. So we can't even talk more, because we believe in you. You are the future, and you make the future look much brighter by just asking the question. You can do it if you want to do it.
I love that. I think we had another question right here. The mic's behind you.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I'm happy to be accompanying these beautiful young women from New Jersey, from Essex County, from a variety of schools. So thank you for that. But I have a comment more than a question. It's kind of interesting, too. So my daughter just got her degree from Union Theological. She got a master's. And so she had a very, very tiny apartment here in Morningside. And the amount of money she was paying for it was just a lot. But what's interesting is that living in New Jersey in towns like Newark, East Orange, Irvington, are creating more housing for New Yorkers. They want you all to come to New Jersey, and New Jersey residents are upset because they're like, you're making housing for New York. So it's all by our train stations so that you can live comfortably in New Jersey and travel to work to New York. And so it's an interesting kind of conversation, because while it seems like in some ways New Yorkers are being pushed out, New Jersey are pushing them in, and then New Jersey residents are feeling like they're being pushed out to give way to New York. This is a really kind of crazy dynamic happening. And that's all.
It is. Can I just, definitely crazy. But I do want to encourage those who know someone who want to stay in New York City, or you want to stay in New York City. There are resources and programs in the pipeline. So there's creative ways to create home ownership so you could stay. We want you to stay. We don't want anyone to go to New Jersey. Nothing against New Jersey, but invest in Brooklyn. And we have many programs and initiatives, and even a down payment closing costs program. So NHS New York City is the administrator for the New York City's Home First program, which provides $100,000 towards the down payment. But that could be layered with other grants and other resources, and that will make it and ease up the purchase power, and you'll be able to purchase what you need. So don't give up on New York, please. Don't give up on New York City. We're still viable.
I'm going to tell you, stay in New York. New York City is the best place to be. No matter where I travel, I'm coming back to New York. And young lady, don't forget to pay your tax. Oh, I don't want you to get in trouble.
Do that for sure.
I have to do your form. So whatever the business you do, make sure you pay your part in the tax, right? Because you stay relevant. Nobody gonna tell you not paying your tax, what kind of business you have. So make sure you do that. And for New York, we're creating, the city council, we're creating opportunity every day. If you're not so sure, you can call any council member. Even you're not in New York, you're in New Jersey, you wanna move back and coming to the best city, in the world, you're still welcome. Thank you.
I want to thank both Councilmember Narcisse, and I want to thank Tonya Ores from NHS NYC, and I want to thank you all, audience. I'm going to turn it over to Lauren and her wonderful team. Enjoy the rest of the day.
Thank you.
All right. You do not want to leave right now. I'm just saying, you don't. Because it is my huge honor. We're going to have a break after this, so I'm going to encourage you all to stay for like 5 more minutes because we have a very special speaker who really went out of her way to be with us today. That was an incredible conversation. We could keep going, but it is my huge honor and pleasure to welcome my friend, New York State Attorney General Letitia James. I was going to say a word. Oh, look at that. All right, like I had a whole speech ready to go about like how I feel about Tish, and I've been one-upped. So look, I just want to say, first of all, I'm deeply grateful for Tish being here. She has been an incredible supporter of ours for more than a decade. I think this is the 3rd or 4th time that she's made the time out of her, you might have heard, slightly busy schedule. I don't know what we're talking about, but we're not going to talk about it, but it's a little busy right now. But it is indicative of this woman's commitment to women leaders, to leadership in this state, to uplifting others, to focus on true service, not just self-service, at a time when that is sorely needed. And it is my great honor to let you all hear from New York State Attorney General Letitia James.
So when she calls you on a Sunday night and say, come on, you gotta come, please, 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 and then more, and then more, and then more. Yes, very persuasive. You've got to be persuasive. So first, it really is an honor and a privilege to be here this afternoon, and I thank you so much for your applause. I want to thank those in the room and all of you who have basically sent me emails and texts and calls and prayers and thoughts. You've filled my heart and you have filled my soul and you've strengthened me, and I want to thank you. And it's also an honor and a privilege to be in this space. This really is a sacred space, a place that has long been synonymous with equity, with inclusion, with justice, and with thought leaders, obviously, who are, again, moving us forward at a time when we find ourselves in the midst of so much chaos and confusion and attacks on our fundamental rights, and individuals who seek to basically readjust the role of government and this balance that we have with the federal government and states, how they want to basically rearrange that and want to put in the hands of one very, very, very dangerous administration, basically unchecked and autonomous power. And that's why I wake up each and every day with this fire in my belly to fight for our rights, to protect our rights, and to restore that balance, which is inherent in our Constitution, inherent, obviously, in the beliefs of our founding fathers and all of those who believed in democracy and all of those who believed that states' rights we share with its shared power with federal authority and federal government. And it's an honor and a privilege, obviously, to be in a room surrounded by extraordinary women and some real brave men. Individuals who are leading with purpose and conviction and passion, particularly during these times. So I want to thank All In Together for creating this powerful space where women from every sector can come together and we can uplift our voices and we can share ideas and we can reimagine leadership for a time such as these. When I look out at this room filled with women who are redefining what leadership looks like, I am reminded of how far we've come and how far we have to go. As most of you know, I am a former city council member, former public advocate, and now the Attorney General. And I decided to run for office having worked for a number of elected officials, mostly men, because I heard from the voices of individuals in public housing, individuals who believed that they were not at the seated table, individuals who felt left out of the sunshine of opportunity, and individual, primarily women with children, who believed that their voices were not being heard. And so I knocked on their humble homes in public housing in downtown Brooklyn, Ingersoll, Whitman, Farragut, Atlantic Terminal, Lafayette Gardens, places that most people dare not to go because of this perception, this stereotype that somehow it's dangerous. When in reality, they opened up their homes and obviously they fed me, and they welcomed me. But most importantly, as we sat around the table, I listened. And the most important message that I can send to you today, if that's the only thing that you can walk away from today, and that is to listen. To listen. And not to judge, and not to impose your value system on someone else, but to see the world through their eyes if you could. And just to recognize all of the issues and all of the problems that they are overcoming and dealing with on a daily basis. And that's what I did. And it was on that day, I'll always remember, where those women lifted me up. They came out with their children, grandmothers and mothers and aunties, and they came out because they wanted to have someone who looked like them, but more importantly, someone who could recognize and understand their struggles in the world. Now we've got a long way to go for residents of public housing, and we hope that one day we'll have a federal government that also views them as individuals who can contribute much to our society, and individuals who respect their rights and who recognize that they've got challenges and who do not believe all of the stereotypes that you have heard about residents of public housing. But a federal government who recognize that they want the same thing that you and I want, and that is to live in a safe home, a safe community, and to have an opportunity to make a better life for their family. We have come far as a society, and each of you obviously represent a different facet of power, civic and corporate and creative power, and together you embody what this summit is all about. That when women lead, that when women lead, that when women lead, everyone rises. We tend not to leave anyone behind. It's just part of who we are. It's part of our nature to think about others before we think about ourselves, and to see the world through an expanded lens. At a time when women's rights and health and safety are under relentless attack, from our reproductive freedom to our right to vote, from equal pay to equal representation, gatherings like this are not just inspiring, but they are essential. They're critical. At this point in time, we need, my friends, we need to be in community. Not only do we need to be out on the streets, as I'm sure some of you were on Saturday, but we also need to start planning for the big comeback, planning so how we can address all of the setbacks that we are experiencing right now. Because when we come together as one, we share stories, we build strategy, we speak our truths. It's important that we not hold back, and that we all come together as one, recognizing that we're all inextricably tied to one another by a strand of humanity. And we've got to organize as we did on Saturday. And all throughout my public life, I've had the honor of organizing, I've had the honor of leading, I've had the honor of setting agendas, and I also have some battle scars to prove it, of using the law both as a sword and as a shield and as a tool for progress as we go forward. You see, I represent this incredible staff right now of individuals who believe that it's really critically important that we protect abortion access for every woman in this state, and that we also support and defend providers that are under attack right now. I don't know if you know, there's a doctor in upstate New York who's been indicted by Louisiana and Texas. Why? Because she prescribed mifepristone to individuals in both of those states. And so those two states, their governors and their attorneys general, they want to prosecute this doctor who lives in New York. And they've issued warrants for her arrest. And we refuse to honor those warrants for her arrest. And I want to thank a clerk in upstate New York who also said, I'm not going to honor it as well, and has reached out to our office, and we are working again to protect this provider's rights. But it's not that doctor alone. There are hospitals here in the state of New York who have been under attack for offering gender-affirming care to our trans community. Individuals who are obviously concerned about what's happening in our nation. And we have defended the rights of those hospitals to offer gender-affirming care, which is health care, to members of the LGBTQ community. I don't know about you, but I will fight like hell for the trans community because they are under attack right now, and because they're being used as a political cudgel at this point in time. I've also worked with labor unions to defend pay equity, equal pay for equal work, and to hold employers accountable for discrimination. In fact, tomorrow I'll be having a press conference where we just settled a case protecting the rights of 700 workers who were denied the opportunity to file for claims at workmen's compensation, but also employees who were being subjected to sexual harassment. And we were able to get some damages for these 700 employees to the tune of I believe it's $1.5 million. Each of the employees, respectively, will get around $1,000 to $2,000 each. And tomorrow, I'm going to stand with those employees and their union to let individuals know that you cannot harass employees. You've got to pay them their due, and most importantly, sexual harassment will not be tolerated here in the state of New York. It's important that we make sure that survivors of sexual harassment and assault are heard, but most importantly, my sisters and those brave men, that they're believed, and that they tell their story, and that they not be victimized again, that they're survivors. And so we've got to stand with them. Because the truth is, none of these victories have been won in isolation. Every case, every law, every reform came from partnerships like partnerships with the Ford Foundation, and advocates and community leaders and unions and organizers and women like so many of you who refused to accept the status quo, women who stepped out of the shadow and into the light and said, I'm a leader. I know what's going on in this company. I know some victims. I know some practices that are illegal and unlawful. I need to do something about it. I need to use my voice and the power that lies within me to step up into the light and to tell the world about what is happening and to provide relief for individuals who are oftentimes afraid, and to let individuals know that they are not alone and that we collectively stand with them, and that there's an army of women and individuals in general who will stand with them. That's what I do on a daily basis. Leadership, as we know, is not about titles or proximity to power. I could care less about your title. I could care less about whether or not you've gone to college. I could care less about your immigration status. I could care less about where you live. In fact, most of the time, I don't even like being with elected officials. I like being close to people who are humbled and people who are not afraid, and people who know what to do with the power that lies within their hands, and people who are not concerned about your title, about your status. It's about using your voice when silence would be safer, but it's about standing up anyhow. And it's about righting wrongs. It's about walking into rooms where decisions are being made and making sure that those rooms get bigger and more inclusive and demanding that you be heard. And when you walk into a room, usually walk to the front and let them see you. It's the kind of leadership that we need today in boardrooms and in classrooms and in hospitals and in state houses and in Congress and in city halls. It's leadership that listens, that learns, that uplifts, that empowers, that inspires. We all know that these are very, very, very challenging times for our country and for all of us. But it's during those dark times it's when the lights shine the brightest. And I see in this crowd today so many lights. I see the light in the eyes of so many young people here today and across the country who are building on the sacrifice of those who came before them. So today, as we talk about the future, let us recommit to mentoring the next generation and inspiring the next generation. Let's open doors and fund opportunities and amplify the voices that have too often gone unheard. Let's make sure our daughters grow up in a world and in a society where women in power, it's just not a headline, it's a norm. And that a woman with a title is not something that's new to us, but something that should be true to all of us. I stand before you today not only as a daughter, a sister, and a woman who has benefited from the courage of those who came before her, from the DNA and from the blood that flows through my veins, from Shirley Chisholm to Barbara Jordan, from the mothers of the civil rights movement to the mothers in my own neighborhoods who sit on the stoop and who tell me everything that happens, but who lead every day without recognition and without a title, and who want action. To every woman here, whether you're leading from the front or working tirelessly from behind the scenes, know that your voice matters and that your vision matters. Your vision for the city, your vision for the state, and at this critical juncture, this critical point in history, your vision for our nation. Let us stand up against those forces who oppose dissent. Let us stand up against those voices who would separate families and put children in prison. Let us stand up today against those individuals right now who are being evicted from their homes, and those mothers in public housing. Let us stand up today for our nation at a time when they seek to trample upon all of our rights. Let us stand up today for clean air and clean water and a clean environment. Let us stand up today recognizing that we're all in this together and putting aside all of our differences and recognize that we're all God's children. And let your leadership move this nation forward now and forever. I want to thank you for inspiring me. I want to thank each and every one of you who has steel in their backbone. I want want to thank you for not bending, not yielding, not capitulating, not giving up, and not giving in. And I want all of you to know, as a result of that, I am so honored and privileged to be in this room. And I know with all of you that the future looks bright, and that this time, my friends, shall pass. Thank you.
I've never had to stand up in front of a microphone after Letitia James. Remind me to never do that again. That is not an easy thing to do. So we've been talking about New York, we've been talking about all of us, and now we're gonna, before we take a break, we're gonna broaden the aperture and look a little bit more at the world. And we're gonna do it with two incredibly brilliant, extraordinary women. My friend Margaret Hoover, I don't think needs much introduction. You may have seen her moderating one of the smartest shows in television, which is Firing Line on PBS. Every week, and by the way, she created, and talk about entrepreneurs, this show happened really because Margaret created it and built the financing for it and all of the infrastructure to make it possible for her voice to be heard. And every week she shows up to do these incredible interviews. Smart, incisive. I encourage you all to watch them. And she is joined by the extraordinary Baroness Dambisa Moyo, who is a member of the United Kingdom's House of Lords and a co-principal at Versaka Investments. She's a global economist, author, and board member, and they're gonna give us a few minutes of insight into the state of the world and the world economy now. Please join me in welcoming Margaret and Baroness Dambisa.
Come on up, Baroness. So wonderful to see you. That's, by the way, the worst billing to put us after Tish James. It was not the intent. That's right. We were supposed to be the warm-up act. Are you ready to follow the Attorney General? I know, it's not the easiest, but you have a great accent, and so that's going to help lull people to
Thanks, Mom.
and also, I think you have like a slightly... you have a somewhat optimistic, maybe contrarian, shall we say, approach to these questions of sort of global economics, macroeconomics. So I should just say, you have a PhD in economics from Oxford. You have a master's degree from Harvard. You're incredibly well educated, 5 best-selling books about global macroeconomics. You serve in the House of Lords, and you also have been one of the women to get a participatory place on corporate boards, from Starbucks to Chevron to Condé Nast. And so I think your perspective here on global macroeconomic trends would be interesting and useful for this audience, and certainly for me. And I wonder if maybe you can just pull back and tell us how you see sort of global economic gains at this moment. There's been a lot of disruption in the global economy, particularly at least from our perspective in the United States with the trade wars and the tariffs. And so I just set the scene for us. How are we doing?
So first of all, thank you so much for including me, for inviting me. I'm absolutely delighted to be here. I should add to that introduction, which sounds like I'm attending my own funeral, to say actually for me, one of the greatest gifts is I'm also an immigrant to the United States. And when you say that perhaps my message is going to be contrarian, I cannot tell you just how grateful I am as an immigrant to be here in the United States and to have had the opportunities that I've had in my life. And I think that's the backdrop from which I make the comment that you are living in the greatest economy, and actually my side hustle is being in the House of Lords, so I really shouldn't be saying this because I'm supposed to be rah, 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 the UK, which I do love, but you are in the most sort of groundbreaking, transformative, incredible economy and country in the world. And I think every now and then you need an outsider to come and tell you that, that's where you are. Now, of course, there are challenges. There's inequity. There are concerns about affordability, and there are real issues around women's rights, women's progress. But I think to focus on those issues only is to miss what is arguably the beginning of what is the greatest super cycle that will occur in our lifetime. And I think maybe just to put some numbers to the argument might be helpful. In order for an economy to really put a dent in poverty and to continue to drive economic success, it needs to be growing by 3% per year. The United States in the last quarter grew by 3.8%. And I can tell you that pretty much every other large global economy, Europe, Asia, South America, Africa, is growing far below that 3% magic number. And we've lived in a glorious time since the 1950s until 2008 of globalization, of women moving into the workplace, of China coming to the WTO in 2001. And as an artifact of that, we saw enormous gains in terms of GDP. And today, the world economy is about $100 trillion, over $100 trillion. Now, there have been some issues with those trends. We know that there's been inequality as the pie got bigger. A lot of people lost their jobs, a lot of displacement, and there's a lot of work going on in public policy and in corporate boards and with investors to try and figure out how to make this system much more equitable. That doesn't mean that we should chuck the baby out with the proverbial bathwater, but what it does mean is we need to take a pause and think about the places in the world that are really going to, in the next 10 years, really deliver economic progress and change living standards. And I would argue that, regarding 90% of the world's population living in the emerging markets, look at the growth rates in Europe. They're around 0.7 if you're lucky, 0.5. Many countries where there are at least 50 million people in the population, Brazil, Argentina, South Africa, are growing far below the 3% rate. So all of this is to say you're in an economy that is growing on all cylinders, and it may not feel like that, it might not feel equitable, and there are clearly some serious structural issues that need to be addressed, but I worry deeply that if we only focus on the glass half empty, we're going to miss in 3 years, in 5 years, in 10 years, enormous gains that are going to occur. And the world is becoming, particularly in the United States, becoming much more democratic with a small d. I don't mean political democracy. I'll leave that to the politicians to debate. I'm talking about access to capital markets, access to the ability to build businesses, whether it's because of the internet or the fact that there's going to be $100 trillion of capital coming from new generations that are emerging and getting older. So I just think we need to reframe this and make sure that we don't wake up in 2028 when the next administration comes in and see that a lot of people who focused on 401k plans or opportunities in the tech sector or in other sectors, and they've made all these returns and gains, and we're still sort of stuck not really taking advantage of energy changes and the climate change, of a lot of innovation that's happening there. So that would be really what I would frame.
So you just said two things that I actually want to follow up on. One, you referenced that we're about to enter the largest economic super cycle of not just our lifetimes, but multiple generations. I presume you're talking about AI and how AI is impacting the economy. I know you wrote a piece that was published, I believe, today on Project Syndicate about sort of whether AI is a bubble. And so I wonder if you could speak to some of the risks that you see in the global economy with respect to these new trends in the super cycle.
Maybe just to take a little bit of a step back and maybe talk, obviously risks will be part of it, but maybe just thinking about what are the structural trends. So these are deep structural trends that are occurring, that are going to continue to occur in the next 10, 20 years. So in no particular order, and we can get into detail if you like, deglobalization is definitely one of those themes. It started in 2009. It's not about President Trump. He's catalyzing it, but it had already started. And deglobalization means trade, change, tariff regimes, capital flows that are restricted, issues around immigration. These are very political and hot topics even across Europe and elsewhere. Issues around multilateralism. So coming together, you just saw the photograph of President Xi hosting a new cabal of countries. The BRICS are the most famous of that. But these new alliances are changing the dynamics in terms of commodity flows, in terms of capital flows, in terms of trade flows. And that is one fundamental structural trend that we will witness, we will experience, and we will live through.
How will that impact us in the United States?
Well, clearly.
Not you, us.
Yeah, well, me too. I'm here. Don't get rid of me. No getting rid of immigrants just yet. But obviously, the tariff thing is the one that I think most economists, myself included, are scratching our heads, because I was among many people in January and through April who said, oh my God, tariffs is like the worst thing. It's a dirty word. From the 1930s with Smoot-Hawley, how can they put tariffs on? But the truth of the matter is that it's kind of been a nothing burger. And my whole thesis is that, and I think many other economists would agree, that it's still too early to see that impact, and maybe that to the extent that there have been negative impacts, have been sort of offset by the AI boom with the $500 billion of capital that's going into the AI market. So I think that's something worth putting a caveat on. But can I just say a few more things in terms of structural changes? It's not just deglobalization.
And can you address the transfer of wealth while you do that? Was that what you were?
I was going to mention the transfer of wealth.
Because that was the second thing you said that I was like, I want to know more about
Margaret.
that. Yeah, no, please. I'm just here to prompt you.
Yeah. Okay, so I'll come to the capital part in a second. But I think growth. I talked about the fact that we need to be growing by 3% per year. I talked about the U.S. growth rate. The U.S. growth numbers are really quite separate from the rest of the world, as I mentioned a moment ago. And that is a structural problem. A lot of the growth that we saw between 1950 and 2008 came from, as I said, women coming into the workforce, particularly after World War II, but also from globalization. So the wall coming down, China bringing in a whole lot of consumers with their population. But a lot of those structural changes are also set to reverse because they've now been accounted for. Where we've got aging populations, demographics, another fundamental change. Japan is about over 100 million population. By the middle of this century, they might have 58 million people. China, which we've always talked about as having 1.3 billion people, could end up with 800 million people by the middle of this century. So there are real changes in dynamics and demographics. But just to your last point, which is about this transfer of wealth, it's coming at the same time when there are enormous opportunities for people to take on more risk, for better or for worse. I alluded to the 401k plans, which you're now able to invest in everything from meme coins to venture capital. That is something that's new, and a lot of that capital wealth that is coming from intergenerational, so the boomers into Gen X or Gen Z, is something that will transform even how companies think about funding themselves. And you may be aware that over the last 10 to 15 years, there's been the number of publicly traded companies has actually decreased by about 50%. That has material implications from about 7,000 to around 3,000 today. It has material implications for where the capital is being made. You probably know companies like Coke or Coke, K-O-C-H, or the Cargill. These companies are privately held companies. They have $150 billion in annual revenues, but these things are going to have structural implications for pension funds, where pension funds and endowments invest, how we think about business growth, how we even hold companies accountable for behaviors, many of the things that the AG mentioned in her remarks. So I'm really here just to say, don't miss out. We've been in this time before. The 1930s, obviously the Great Depression, was a period of low economic growth, bigger government, more deglobalization, a lot of the themes that we're dealing with today, but it was also a time of great innovation. Ford, so Henry Ford started his company there, Howard Hughes. There were a lot of companies that were invested and started and accelerated in terms of their growth in that Great Depression period. So I'm simply here to say, of course, there are massive headwinds. Of course, it feels like you're drinking from sort of a fire hydrant. But I do worry a lot that we're going to miss out on where the opportunities come. And I think, again, the AG alluded to when the time is coming back, we just need to be ready for when that time comes back, because we cannot then say, oh, I should have invested, I should have understood what was happening. T-bills are at 4%. You know, I know that there are issues around affordability, there are issues around incomes and jobs and AI, you know, diminution of jobs, but I just think we as leaders, being in this room, are obviously leaders, need to think about a narrative that says this too shall pass, and where are we going to be at that time?
Well said. I don't think there's anything else to add to that. I think that's our 15 minutes on that optimistic note. Dambisa, Baroness, Moyo, thank you very much for joining us. Thank you.
I mean, they did manage to follow Tish pretty spectacularly, actually. That was really incredible. We are going to take a brief break, and as instructed, you're supposed to make friends with somebody that you don't know. And I think we have a number of our speakers who are going to be staying during the break. Please come back. We will be back in about 15 minutes. Please enjoy refreshments and one another. Thank you so much. Oh my God. Can I ask everyone to please take their seats and come back together? Because we have a lot of very important people who have very complicated schedules that we want to accommodate. And I'll let you all kind of filter back in, but I don't want to lose too much time. We're going to make a little bit of an adjustment. If you're really following along at home, you will notice we've made a few changes to accommodate some people so that we could make sure that they would be here. But we're going to start off, if I can ask you all to come back together. Thank you. I told you to talk to each other, so it's my fault. I did do that. Did you all make friends at the break? Who made friends? Okay, listen, you're not gonna leave right after we're over, because there is fabulous food and more connections with one another, and we're having a reception afterwards, so I just wanna remind you of that. But I wanna invite up our next amazing group of speakers. It's actually like sort of a perfect segue from talking about the sort of broader picture of the global economy and of New York and where we fit in, to talking with three incredible leaders, political leaders here in New York. First of all, moderating our conversation is our wonderful board member and friend, Camille Joseph Goldman, who is Vice President of Government Affairs at Charter Communications. She also serves in a lot of really extraordinary community leadership roles here in New York, including on the National Action Network Board. Ms. Dominique Sharpton in the House, just giving it a shout out. Coming to her in a minute. But the other women that she is going to speak to are making incredible contributions to our lives here in New York. So first of all, it is my honor to welcome up New York's first female Senate Majority Leader, Andrea Stewart Cousins. My dear friend, she is also a regular all-time, all-in-together supporter. This is like probably her, yeah, I just keep calling her because she's so fabulous, and you'll see why. She has obviously been a tireless advocate for women throughout her very long and distinguished career in public service. And she is joined by a newer voice in New York politics, Dorcey Applyrs, who is Albany Chief City Auditor. And for those of you who might be following along with Albany politics, I know so many of you are. Not really, but we are, we promise. New Yorkers do pay attention outside of the city, I promise. She is also the Democratic nominee to be mayor of Albany. She has an election coming up in November. Some of you may have heard there's an election here in New York happening in a couple weeks. And then last but absolutely not least is Assemblymember Latrice Walker, who represents New York's 55th Assembly District in Brooklyn. We've had a lot of Brooklyn in the house today. I haven't been to Brooklyn in a while, I'm going to be honest, but I do love Brooklyn. And then Camille Joseph Goldman, please join me in welcoming them.
Hello and good afternoon, everyone. It's been an incredible day so far. We heard from so many dynamic speakers. I think, as Lauren said, this is a perfect segue. The ladies on this stage, they really need no introduction. I'll have them each give a little bit about themselves before they answer their questions. But for so many different reasons, these dynamic women have created space for many people, including myself, to be in rooms. Both in corporate settings and in government settings throughout my entire career. You'll hear from women today who have been the first of class, whether Senate majority leaders and presidents, mayoral-elects in one of the largest cities in upstate New York, as well as most recently, chair and president of the Black and Latino Conference. But before you were assembly member, you were a leader in so many spaces in Brooklyn. And we're here today to hear about their journey and ask some key questions. I think my first question is going to be, given everything that's going on, I think gender representation has become so important and important for many people here in this room. The question is for New York State, what will it take to achieve parity? How do we get more people and women to run for office, and how will that change the dynamics of political discourse in the state? We'll start with you, Senate Majority Leader.
Well, thank you so much, and it's always good to be in your presence. And thank you to Lauren for making sure that we make space for these voices and really create, hopefully, an image of who you are, all of you, and who you can become. What's it gonna take? It's gonna take what's happening now. It's gonna take your engagement in what is happening right here, right now, and making the decision that you, yeah, you, are the leader that you're looking for. How many people know that? Come on, I need some hands. The reality is most women get involved when something is going terribly wrong. A lot of men, it's what they want, it's their power, they saw their friends, so on and so forth. You know how that is. Women, no. Women got to be asked several times to run, and they are usually motivated because something is wrong. And that's why I'm saying this is our moment. Something is wrong, okay? Very wrong. So once you know something is wrong, then you do something. And when you do something, you will be amazed at how many doors open. Now, there used to be a time that there weren't women leaders and you didn't see women in spaces. And frankly, I'm old enough to remember when we didn't have reproductive rights, we didn't have any opportunities outside of being a teacher or a nurse or whatever. If you were a woman of color, you didn't even have those options that easily. But the fortunate part about where we are now is that you see yourself in so many places. We are also at a moment where people were wanting to drag it back, and that's why you have to do something. So please be inspired and encouraged. If you want to run, run, because that's what it will take. It will take you raising your hand or encouraging another good woman to raise their hand and get in the game, but get in the game for something bigger than yourself. Get in the game for the rest of us who are depending on you.
And we'll go on. The one thing I want to note is that I'm sadly old enough to remember in New York State when you were the only woman holding office that represented a sizable body in the state. Before Governor Hochul, before Tish James, there was a president, Senate Majority Leader Andrea Stewart-Cousins. So thank you.
Thank you. And again, the first woman to lead a conference in the history of almost 250 years. So, but look how long it's, and this is New York.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm saying. Look at what, and our first governor.
Correct.
First woman attorney general. You go on and on and on. So we are just now breaking barriers, and we're New York. That's what I say. We can't stop.
No.
This is not the moment.
And I would just add, I looked out in the audience when our majority leader asked the question, how many of you see yourselves as the leaders that we're talking about? And there were a few hands. I recall early in my career being in a space similar to this, and I walked into a room and slid in the back and sat in a chair. And I remember being so mesmerized by the facilitator. She was a very bold woman, and she was commanding that space. And as I watched her, there was a voice that said to me, stop asking for permission. And so many of us are waiting to be given permission to take on leadership roles. And what I've learned in my journey, or along my journey, is that No one is going to give you that permission. You yourself have to say, this is what I am going to do. And then start building your village and your team around you, and they will help you get there. But if you are in the back of the room waiting for someone to say, yeah, you're the one that we've been waiting for, it's not going to happen. And so own your space. There have been so many women who have sacrificed. I think about my grandmother, who was a waitress for 50 years from Lawrence, South Carolina. My grandmother waited tables her entire career. And so who am I to shrink in a room when my grandmother was just in the room to serve and exit? And so we are the ones that we've been waiting for. Women are uniquely prepared to lead in this moment. When women lead, we put the public back in public service. The issues that we are fighting for are the issues that impact children and families, and oftentimes we are the ones caring for children and families, and so we personalize these issues in a very different way. And when you personalize something, you are more likely to attack it with a different level of care and compassion. The last point that I'll make, and I'll pass the mic here, is that we also create an ecosystem for everyone to thrive. As a mom, when I look at other people, I see the human in them because I know that you are somebody else's baby. And in the same way I would want a stranger to care and look out for my child, it is my obligation to look out for somebody else's child. And so we create ecosystems that are not only diverse, but we also create ecosystems that make working and being in a professional setting comfortable for the everyday person. If you have a child, there's certain flexibilities that you need to work. And so there are so many things that happen and change when you have women in leadership roles. We're more likely to check the ego. We are more likely to be collegial. We are more likely to see the gifts in other people and say, you might not have it all, but I'm going to tap you and help you aspire and achieve.
Wow. That was awesome. So good afternoon, good evening, everyone. My name is Latrice Walker, and sometimes I always think about myself, even being here in this building, that I'm a little black girl from Brownsville. And sometimes I have to pinch myself because I think about what my experiences were growing up in public housing. And I recognize that even though government didn't speak to my community directly, it was never necessarily a thing that I was expected to go to high school, finish, go to college, and then to have the unmitigated audacity to think that I could go to law school and become an attorney. It just wasn't in the plan, right? They looked to bury me, but they didn't realize that young girls like me are seeds, right? And so, eventually, as our amazing moderator, Camille, mentioned, I started out as a staffer. I loved to make other people shine, as I'm sure so many of you do. I was counsel to Congresswoman Yvette Clarke. We were down in Washington, D.C., and I was looking at the dynamics around me and continuing to do the work. And so, no, I wasn't one of those individuals who said, you know what, when I grow up, I want to be in the New York State Legislature, one amongst 73 other women who are serving. I just was a person who was working in the field until someone saw me. And yes, many times it takes women 7 times to be asked to run for office before it is seeable, or at least foreseeable, for us to be able to see it in ourselves. And I was, asked. I had a little girl. My daughter was just born. And I'm like, I'm breastfeeding, and I got all these different things. I can't run for office. How am I going to do this? My mom is at home. We were talking about the black tax and really what it means to be a woman and the extra expenses that we have to think about with childcare, and just even breaking glass ceilings in our everyday lives. So I really could not see myself there until one day I thought about those women who are struggling just to make ends meet, who are making enough money every day just to be broke. And I said to myself, I know that there are a lot of men. There were 7 men in the race that I ran in. And I looked and I said, if I didn't do this, I would never be able to live with myself. I was made for this moment. I was geared for this moment. I was reared for this moment, so why not me? And I put myself, in that ring, and I won. And I was shocked, right? Like me, here I am. And then I get into the legislature, and one day there was a gentleman who stood up in the assembly chamber and said that the most dangerous place for a black child was in his mother's womb. And I recognized in that very moment that we have to build with organizations like All In Together, the League of Women Voters, all of the Divine Nine organization, and women's groups all across America to recognize that we have to empower and encourage other young girls and women to be willing to step up to the plate, to run for office, because there's definitely a place for you. That's the only way we're gonna be able to get pay parity. When we elect more people who are like-minded, who carry those pocketbook issues and the issues of our community members and our families on our shoulders. Remember, men had the right to vote for a very long time before women actually got it. We only had the right to vote a little over 100 years. And if you are a black woman, it took another 50 years to be able to determine that. And so we have a huge responsibility on our shoulders to not just encourage and register more people like us, more women to vote, also recognize how important we are to the electorate and making sure that we elect people who espouse our ideals, but to also put more women in office so that when they sit at the seat of power, and men will try to rip that power out of their hands, but we know that Shirley Chisholm told us that if they don't give us a seat at the table, we bring our folding chair. But I'd like to add one more thing to that. I said that Brownsville and Brooklyn didn't send me to Albany just to knock the doors to bust the doors open, but they sent me there to take it off the hinges so that they can never put it back on again and hold it open so that more women like you could take the seat of power.
Well, first, let me say, before I came to Charter Communications, I worked in government and politics, and I knew you when you were a staffer, and no one was surprised that Latrice won her race. It was well-deserved, and it was needed and necessary. One thing you did mention, though, you said someone told you to run, and that seems to be an important and seminal part of a woman's progression in public office. I would like to give the other panelists an opportunity to share who first told you to run, or that you were a leader. I selfishly want to admit that some of the women on this stage have invested in my leadership, have called me a leader, have helped me, and I think, leader, you're one of the first people to actually tell me that. And I'm just curious about who it was that told you those words and what it meant to you, and how, like, your presence today shows how you're cascading it on, but how are you paying it forward?
So the first person, first of all, again, I probably like so many, and certainly like Latrice, I was born in public housing and went to public schools, and in fact, I was a teenage unwed mother, and I was definitely on my road to being a statistic. And again, there weren't, I'm a little bit older than everybody here, so where she had, Shirley and you already had a congresswoman and this and that, there was nobody. So I, that's why I said you get involved because you get involved. When we moved to Yonkers, I was an adult, I live in Yonkers still, and there was a desegregation case, and there were 3 people running for mayor, 2 did not want to comply with the law that said we had to desegregate. One did. I got involved because at that point I was a mom, my kids were going to these schools, people were picketing and trying to stop them from going to these, to the other side of town, and it was getting scary and violent. So with the NAACP and the other organizations who were key in bringing the lawsuit that had been successful, I joined with other friends and we started organizing parents and so on. Ultimately, when we supported the one who wanted to actually comply with desegregation, and just so you know, this was in the 1990s in New York, okay, just to put context in it, he asked me to join his administration and be that liaison between the east side and the west side, and people who are at the table and getting people to come to the table. So it was in that context that I realized, in many ways, the power of government. Public housing was a result of the federal government thinking that they should provide public housing, but mostly for veterans. And again, to put context, my dad was a World War II veteran, Purple Heart, Bronze Star, a black veteran who was not allowed to live in the white suburbs that were being built, or to get a home loan, or to anything. So their answer was public housing and public schools. So when I got into the position of power, I realized that the same government that segregated is the same government that desegregated. The same government that said, and I can go on and on about the dichotomy, but I realized it was who's sitting in these seats, okay? So the first person who asked me to run, however, was a guy who wanted me to run against an enemy of the sitting mayor who I was working for. Because people will do that too. They're not looking out for you. They're like, oh, go do that. Let's give her a problem. But he planted a seed. So what I did do is look around to see the person who should have been helping the community to grow in that moment and who I did not feel was. And so I primaried him and I won, and the rest is history. So that's what happened.
And just before you weigh in, the one thing I want to say is, across the nation, we're seeing that particularly black mayors and women mayors are under attack. I would say being a woman, a black woman, and being at the helm of municipal government is probably the most frightening and challenging job in politics today. So in addition to saying what inspired you, who asked you to lead, what's making you stay the course? Because you are on the path to be the next mayor of Albany.
That's right. Yay!
I think that, as Latrice put it, being made for the moment, I tell colleagues and others who look at my stature and ask the question, are you strong enough? Are you able to lead a city? And these are people who are not used to dealing with women, in particular black women. There's a saying, you don't know how strong a woman is, and they reference that to a tea bag until she's dipped in hot water. And I've been dipped in enough hot water in my life that I know what I'm made of. You might not know, but I know.
About to find out.
Yes. And so when people ask a question, people have literally asked me, are you scared? Never scared. Never, never. I was a student at UAlbany. Actually, I was born and raised in Washington, D.C., and moved to, let's go D.C., and moved to upstate New York for graduate school. I really thought that my journey to upstate would be a 2-year pit stop. I was moving to pursue my master's in public health. I packed up my little Toyota Tercel, it was a stick shift. And I drove myself and all of my possessions to Albany thinking that this would be a 2-year stop. I didn't know really anybody in Albany, with the exception of the gentleman who recruited me to Albany and his wife. And Albany started off as a very lonely place for me because I did not have a network. And Albany, it's a city of families. But I was in graduate school, finished a master's, decided to go for the doctorate, and I'm sitting in the dean's office. I worked in the dean's office, and the assistant dean, who was a woman, said, "Dorcey, there's this fellowship opportunity I think you would be phenomenal for. It's through the university. It's the Center for Women in Government, Women in Public Policy Fellowship. And if you're interested in politics, I encourage you to look up this fellowship. It's for women across the country. We also accept international students." But that fellowship changed my life. Mm-hmm. Despite growing up in our nation's capital, just steps away from where it all happens, I never saw myself running for office, never, not once. And this fellowship allowed me to see other women who were running for office or holding seats of power. So much so that I remember sitting in that classroom and the light bulb went off, and I said, I can do this. But the truth is, the same moment that that light bulb went off, there was another voice that said, "You can't do it, you don't know anybody here, you don't have the money." And shortly after I completed the fellowship, a older Italian, feisty woman, Judith Mazza, who was my mentor, she was out canvassing for a candidate, and she stopped at my door, and I was out watering my flowers, and we had a casual conversation. I thought that was the end of that 20-minute conversation. She later called me and said, "Let's meet for coffee." And when we met, she said, "I want to know if you would run for city council." I thought she was talking to somebody else at the table. I didn't know that she was talking to me. And that is the conversation that changed my trajectory. So the fellowship first, you got to see it to see it. You got to see it to see it, for me. And that fellowship started me on a path and the ask. I was asked to run, so I became a city councilwoman, now city auditor, and now poised to make history as Albany's first mayor of color and only second woman in 400 years.
So last question. I just wanted to first thank you all for your leadership. One thing I want to say is the Attorney General was here earlier. She talked about women being coalition builders. And we talked about how challenging it is to be an elected official right now. As women, how do you utilize your seat of power to reach across the aisle and build coalition? And it could be through a partisan lens or even through a gendered lens. You're often probably the only woman in the room, sometimes the only woman of color. How do you empower yourself to build coalitions, understanding that the decisions that you're making, the work that you're doing, impacts so many New Yorkers?
Awesome. So, I would say that, first off, the Attorney General was one of the first entry points for me into government. So the first person that ever asked me to run for office is Letitia James. And then it was running for district leader, of course, which is an unpaid position, but it was allowing me to hone in my skills on campaigning and fundraising. And so I remembered, really just how difficult it was for her to be able to think she could be the first woman public advocate of the city of New York. But, a number of women across the aisle and across socioeconomic status came together to support her, notwithstanding a number of the other individuals who was running for that seat, and notwithstanding the fact that she was not the favored candidate in that time. Right? She was always a darling of labor, but it was hard in order for us to be able to get them to have the level of support for her. A darling of the community, a darling of government, but yet and still, there was always still the side eye to be the first. And so I think about, that moment. I also think about the courage that it takes to be able to go across the aisle for people who who have said to you straight out, that I am not here for your interests. I have no concern about most of what it is that you're saying. I am here to represent my community who does not view the world the same way that you do. But you know, again, I still think about all those women back home and really what it took for them to be able to put down all of their responsibilities to ensure that women like us are elected to office. And so I stand, you know, strong and proud. I speak with a strong voice. I love Barbara Jordan. You know, I listen to her speeches all of the time, and I think about her deflection and just how she never allowed herself to be a shrinking violet. And then I'm also very spiritual, right? And so I think about Esther. And sometimes you gotta go to the king for such a time as this. And even though it's not in vogue to be able to do that, but you still have to hold your head up high. And so there are many times when we're doing maybe even criminal justice reform, and there are folk who are generally men who think that they are smarter and swifter and have more expertise on an issue than I have. And then I open my mouth. And I bring with me the law. I bring with me the toils and the stories and the rememories of my ancestors. And when I speak, I shut them down. And so many times going across the aisle means that I have to leave some people bludgeoned on the chamber floor. But we do what we have to do because we know how important it is to make sure that issues of women and of our communities are first and foremost our priorities and are achieved in Albany. But I wish I could say that I have the biggest sort of battle when it comes to going across the aisle, but our Senate Majority Leader, she's tried and tested.
Yeah, I am. We probably got to.
Yeah, so we unfortunately, a side of a good panel is that we're out of time, but I did want to thank everyone for coming today. Thank you for your wisdom, your knowledge, but most importantly, your leadership. Thank you so much.
So much.
Thank you.
Oh my God, these amazing women, you could listen to them all day. Thank you all so, so much. So as you know, we're slightly out of order, but we're coming back to it. So I said at the beginning of the program that the beating heart of New York, it is obviously all the women in this room, but it is also the arts. And the art community in this city is so much about what brought me here, what I know keeps so many of us in this incredible place. And so we wanted to take a few minutes today to talk about something really different, which is the business of Broadway. And you may not know, but Broadway is full of absolutely incredible women leading, bringing great art to the stages, to our communities. So we're going to hear from three of them now. Please join me in welcoming our moderator, my dear friend Alysia Reiner, who's an actress and an activist. Also in season 3 of The Diplomat, which is all over your phone right now. Woo-hoo, so exciting. I texted her and I asked her to do this, and then literally I opened my phone and Netflix had her like running across my phone. It's the Secret Service for the president. So she's amazing. And then also please join me in welcoming several of my other amazing friends. Dominique Sharpton, who is the Tony-winning producer of, of Hell's Kitchen. Gilad, who is a 7-time Tony winner, unbelievable, for an incredible array of shows on Broadway, and my dear friend, Mandy Greenfield, who is a television, movie, and Broadway producer. Over to you, ladies.
All right, they're mics. Hi, everybody. I want to start by thanking the incredible Lauren and All In Together, because as Tish said, we need to be in rooms together and remind each other that we are community and remind each other that when women lead, we all rise. And that's why we're here. And thank you to the Ford Foundation, who creates these spaces on the daily. Like the last time I was here was 2 weeks ago, singing with the Resistance Revival Chorus. We are a chorus who sings because joy is an act of resistance. We also sang at No King's Day this weekend. And it was really incredible listening to all of these incredible leaders. And I was thinking about this idea of listening, as Tish said, and engaging, and seeing the world through their eyes if you could. And that is what we do. That's what all of these extraordinary Tony-winning women here do, is, I also heard about nurturing seeds, and that's also what you guys do. And I want to start by saying, when I think about my purpose at the intersection of art and activism and business, I think about the love and evolution, like not Darwin, but transformation of myself and the planet. And I guess I'll start by saying to all of you, how did you become a Broadway producer, and what is your mission in being a Broadway producer?
Want me to start? Yeah. Okay, well, I'm Dominique Sharpton. Hi, everyone. I started producing on Broadway actually by accident. So what happened was, let me go back, okay? I've always been enthralled in the arts. I have a degree in arts education from UMass. I did the conservatory training at AMDA. My track was acting. I had a teacher in conservatory who literally looked at me and was like, I have no idea what to do with you. You got a little this, you got a lot of that. There's really no scope and no frame for you to fit in on Broadway. Okay, so I took that, and it actually lingered with me, obviously, through my whole adult life. Every audition I went to, I was trying to fit this box that didn't exist, really. And so fast forward 17 years later, I got a call from a very good friend of mine, Haley Swindle, who had been acting on Broadway, who had done a little producing, but she was my best friend. We met during a very terrible show in Cape Cod called Showboat. The show was not terrible, but this rendition of Showboat was horrific. But I made a best friend from that experience who called me and was like, listen, Alicia Keys is looking for some Black women who are fearless, who are activists, who can raise some money in 2 weeks. A lot of money. What do you say? And I was like, me? Why are you calling me? And she's like, I couldn't think of anyone else. Okay. So we had 2 weeks to raise a lot of money for this show that Alicia Keys had been working on for 13 years. She brought to Broadway, finally, called Hell's Kitchen. And, and so I said, well, yeah, I'm not gonna back down from a challenge. Let me see what I can do. I did my raise in a week and a half. And from then on, I said, okay, next shows came, Sunset Boulevard and Redwood. And I literally just started calling my friends. Janaye Ingram's in the room, and I said, listen, do you want to get involved in Broadway? Investing, producing? No idea what they're doing, no idea what's going on, but we know that when we step in a room and when we show up big time, and we're gonna do our part. And so we did our part. Not only then, but Sunset Boulevard got me a Tony Award. And I never knew. I wanted to write that teacher back and say, hey, guess who made it to Broadway? But I said, you know what? Let me just continue to stand in this light, because I feel like it's inspirational to everyone to know that you can do it if you put your mind to doing it, and that it does exist. The space for you does exist in this space, and you just have to claim yours.
I love that so much. And, in reference to what we've been hearing about so far today, I'm on the board of the Gina Davis Institute, which is all about when you can see it, you can be it. That's right. And we need that in our stories, but we also need it in the people behind the stories who step up in the way that we've heard today. All right, Sue, your turn.
Well, I think the magic of theater is you can't do it alone. You really need a sense of community. So I grew up doing what my big sister did. She went to dance class. I went to dance class. Apparently, you're not supposed to talk in dance class. So I moved really quickly to theater. If your emotions are too big to talk, then you sing. I couldn't really sing, but screaming was like a good approximation. And I got to be around the loudest, most joyful, most thrilling human beings ever, and I just knew I always wanted to be in that room. So I became a performer because I think everybody, that's how you start. We call them our sales team because they're the pretty shiny people, right? And then eventually some of my friends said, hey, I wrote a thing and you're like the most, bossy and obnoxious person I know. So that's a producer, how about you put it up? I said, that sounds like a lot of fun. Is it okay if I mess up your show entirely? And because we were friends and because we'd been through the trenches, musical theater trenches, it's like army. You're together all the time. And if you survive that, then you're either gonna be mortal enemies or you're gonna be best friends forever. So I took some of my best friends and they believed in me and we took their show and got to raise the family. You get to create who's gonna be in the room with you, right? And then you're gonna take a room full of strangers and make them all family inside of 2 weeks. And then you're gonna go and share that joy and that love and that trust with audiences all over the place. I was hooked.
I love that so much. Do I love everything? Yes. I will say, the hardest thing about being an artist for me, and I don't know if all of you experience this, is we create these families and then the show ends and you disperse. And I want to be family forever with a lot of them, and there just aren't enough hours in a day, and there's a real detached with love about it all. Anyway, please, Mandy.
I just need to add to that an important. Now you guys are all theater insiders, so I just want to tell you what a showmance is. Right. So if a showmance lasts after the show closes, it's for real.
It's for real.
I met my husband at 20 years old doing Shakespeare in Vermont, doing 12th night, and we're still together.
And my husband and I met on a Pizza Hut commercial. We were both extras.
And my husband wants nothing to do with everything that we do. You noticed when we came on stage together, it was the Tony Award-winning producer Dominique Sharpton, it was the Tony Award-winning producer Sue Gilad, and this other lady. And the reason for that is because my trajectory is actually somewhat different. I actually came up through the not-for-profit in New York. For a decade, I was the artistic producer of the Manhattan Theater Club, and then I was the artistic director of a cultural institution called the Williamstown Theater Festival for 7 seasons. And in New York City, there's this sort of bifurcation on Broadway between the not-for-profit and the commercial sector. And historically, it's been that the not-for-profit has really been the powerhouse kind of generator of new, risky, bold, if you want to call it avant-garde, sometimes it's just strange and bad stuff that goes on, and sometimes then makes the leap into the commercial arena. And the commercial producers are the ones who say, hey, Alicia Keys is one of the most extraordinary forces on earth. Let's also have her on Broadway, right? And they kind of start at a different place from how to put a show together and where to launch it. And so my work has won Tony Awards for 20 years, but I myself have only recently actually entered the commercial arena as a commercial producer. I started my own company called Red Yes Studio a couple of seasons ago, and I am now trying to bring new work. I'm a writer's producer, so I commission and develop new English language, mostly American, some British, Irish, Australian work for the stage.
Amazing. And just to toot your horn for a second, you commissioned Liberation, which is on Broadway now, yeah?
Well, yes, but it's not fair for me to take credit for that because I did. I mean, technically I did, but...
I'm sorry. But weren't we just instructed by other women in this room to take credit for things?
I'm
what now?
The least modest person you'll ever meet. Bess Wall, who wrote Liberation, and you should go see it, is extraordinary. I commissioned her to write a play when I was running one of those not-for-profits. She started writing Liberation, and it was so, I think, kind of enormous in her heart that she needed more time than the term of the commission. And so, in fact, she said, I'm going to put this one on pause. I'm going to write a different play called Grand Horizons, which I developed and I produced on Broadway, and it was Tony Award nominated. And so, in fact, we wound up doing Grand Horizons, and we did get back to Liberation, but I moved on from that post. So it continued in other people's hands.
Thank you. And I do think what's important to me about pointing out Liberation is it is so much a female-driven cast producing. You know, the producers are all women. It's a female director. It's a female writer. It's about women. And I think as we're about to parlay into this next conversation, we need to invest in each other. Like, that's part of what the business of Broadway is about. So I want to ask, like, you have a group of humans right here who might want to invest in Broadway. What are tips? How is it different or similar than other investments? What is the model? What should they look for? Mandy, let's start with you.
Well, why don't you talk to the Tony Award winners first? God. Listen, they say, the adage is, right, that the only thing riskier than the restaurant business is show business, right? It's an incredibly risky endeavor. But I think when helmed by professionals and guided well, can be unbelievably rewarding, as much for the seat at the table of watching it happen, being a part of making something happen from nothing, as it is for the potential financial returns and everything in between. So I think you two should speak to this a little bit more as well.
Sure, I can guarantee you a really great opening night party. And on top of that, I will tell anyone who wants to invest in theater that if you cannot afford to lose this money, stop the conversation now. Go to the show, be a supporter, get a subscription to whatever season that you're at. Support the theater every way you possibly can. But we're really fortunate, I think, that you don't necessarily need a Broadway budget to create something incredibly magical. Some of the best shows I've ever seen have been in people's living rooms, mostly mine. You're all invited. But I think if you want to invest in theater and you like the idea of venture capital, or what we call alternative sleeve investment, find a project that you can see 8 times a week. I have seen Moulin Rouge several hundred times.
Oh my gosh, Moulin Rouge is amazing.
Aww.
It is amazing.
So, right, so you want that feeling for the show that you're going to be a part of and that you're going to be a champion of. You want to make sure that it's something that you can answer the phone and say, Hell's Kitchen, how can I help you? Because you're going to say it 9 million times. So make sure that whatever project you're behind makes your heart beat faster, makes you smile bigger. And what I'll say, for a couple of tips for anybody who wants to raise funds for anything, if the person that you're talking to doesn't have this reaction, find out who did they know who will.
Yeah, I agree with that. Everything was on point. I would just say, like she said, find something that you're passionate in. The worst thing to do is to raise money for something you do not believe in, and to give money to something you really don't care about. It's not enough to just be in the room. So the parties are great, right? It's great to be in the room. But you also want to bring to the room as well. So I always look for opportunities. I know after you win a Tony Award, everyone comes to you with projects, right? It's like, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. Can you invest? And it's like, I really look for projects to invest in that, one, so this may be criticized, but I've actually put my own money in so that I know exactly what I'm talking to you about. I'm not going to try to sell something to you that I have not experienced myself. So I actually invested myself just to see, okay, how does this work? So that when I have a conversation with you, I'm bringing that human experience to the arena that you're getting into. So that's also important. Everyone can't do that, obviously, but it's something that you should do if you can. And then also, again, find something that you're absolutely passionate about. Something, like she said, that you can see 8 times a week. Something that you won't mind, telling your family and friends, make sure you go see that. And so that is another great tool in Broadway shows, that you gotta talk about the show. You've gotta market the show. You've gotta be one of the brand of the show. So I'm actually a walking billboard for Hell's Kitchen. You can't have a conversation with me without hearing about the show, without me asking, have you been to it? Have you seen it? Have your children gone? Because it is an experience, and we do have a family, but it's also bringing something to the room that no one can take away from you.
And I would also add to that, I mean, I think that somebody once said to me that if you have an experience in the theater at any point of entry, whether you're an investor, you've written it, whatever your point of entry is, if on opening night or any night thereafter, you say, I want to do that again with that group of people, people get better. And this is an art form where as you do it, you get better every time. You're learning every time. You're making mistakes, but then you're getting smarter, and you're doing things in a different, more innovative, more front-footed, bolder way. And I think that even in investing, right? Like, don't, bite off what you can chew, put toe in the water, and every time you do it, you'll get a little savvier. You'll know what questions to ask. You'll know what you're looking for in something that is negotiable, that isn't negotiable, that will make it both worth your time and your money and your experience, and that you'll learn from.
Amazing advice for investing from all. And I think we're out of time, sadly. So, yeah, chat with everybody after. And thank you for having us.
Thank you. I know. It's like speed dating.
I know, it feels like it's flying by. We have 2 last wonderful, extraordinary conversations that I hope you will stay for. I want to invite one of the most important women you have perhaps not heard of, who has been shaping the future for all of us, and her name is Jennifer Klein. Jen Klein has been leading American foreign policy and domestic policy on women's rights for the better part of the last 30 plus years at the State Department, at the White House, for several administrations, and she is now teaching at Columbia and writing extraordinary work. And she is going to talk to us for a couple minutes about what it is going to take to get to gender equality globally in our lifetimes, God willing. Please join me in welcoming Jennifer Klein.
Thank you, Lauren. First of all, it's totally unfair to follow the Broadway panel. And second of all, it's really unfair to be given that task. So I'm going to do the best I can with a limited period of time. But I want to actually begin with the history that precedes this moment that we're in, for those who don't know. 30 years ago, tens of thousands of government delegates and civil society leaders gathered at the United Nations 4th Conference on Women in Beijing. And this conference was really a watershed moment in the fight for women's rights, because it unified governments and, really importantly, also civil society behind the rallying cry that women's rights are human rights. And as a result, 189 countries signed this ambitious declaration and platform for action that outlined a very ambitious and comprehensive agenda spanning 12 different areas: education, health, freedom from violence, economic participation, power and leadership, the environment. And this blueprint really created, or this platform really created, a blueprint for progress for women around the world. What we did with this report is try to measure the progress that we've seen and do something a little bit different this time, because every 5 years we commemorate this anniversary of Beijing, and every 5 years we say, there's been some progress, but also not enough. So since 1995, what have we seen? We have seen significant gains in many of the Beijing platform's critical areas of concern. Women have importantly won legal rights and protections in over 100 nations. More than 1,500 legal reforms were enacted that advance women's equal participation in society. The gap in primary school has largely closed on a global level, giving a generation of girls access to educational opportunities. And the maternal mortality rate has declined substantially, including because women have had access to family planning more than ever before. However, the work really remains unfinished, even in those areas that I just outlined, and progress has been incredibly slow. For example, global progress in women's formal labor participation has been stagnant. Violence against women, of course, persists in every region of the world. Women remain dramatically outnumbered in positions of power and leadership in both the public and private sectors, and remain underrepresented in peace and security efforts. And even where women's legal protections do exist, stubborn social norms often inhibit equal application and implementation of those laws. Furthermore, there are new threats on the horizon. Rising authoritarianism and democratic erosion have resulted in a systematic rollback of women's rights in this country, as we all know, and also around the world. Technological innovations that generated new opportunities for women and girls have also introduced new forms of inequality, including threats to women's safety online, amplification of misogynistic content, and bias in artificial intelligence. Conflict and crises, including the effects of climate change, are surging around the world and pose disproportionate risks to the health, economic participation, and security of women and girls. And these challenges are rising at a moment when resources, policies, and political will in support of women's equality are under attack in many parts of the world. In 2024, nearly a quarter of countries reported a backlash on women's rights and gender equality. We have and continue to see this backlash right here in our own country. The effect of the Dobbs decision, which eliminated the fundamental constitutional right to an abortion, continued to reverberate around the country. As I'm sure you all know, 19 states either ban or severely restrict abortion, and we see the dire consequences to access to abortion as well as to maternal health more generally. One particular moment of backsliding that is of concern to me, I led the White House Council on White House Gender Policy Council in the Biden-Harris administration, and on the first day of the Trump's second term, that policy council was dismantled, and that has been just part of a purge of federal programs related to women, from funding for women's health research to enforcement of workplace discrimination to initiatives to prevent gender-based violence. 30 years from Beijing, we need a new strategy to finish the unfinished business of the Beijing Platform for Action and to address these modern-day challenges to women's rights. The Institute of Global Politics, as you heard, initiative at Columbia University, which I direct, partnered with an organization called GWL Voices to release a new report on this topic, Beijing Plus 30, a roadmap for women's rights for the next 30 years. In this report, we identify 4 policy priorities critical to advancing equality for women and girls in the 21st century. First, we highlight the importance of advancing democracy and human rights, which, as I said, is really under threat and which is, of course, essential to unlocking the full potential of women and girls. Threats to democratic rights, freedoms, and institutions are growing around the globe. Autocracies currently outnumber democracies for the first time in 20 years. Think about that. And nearly 3/4 of the world's population now are living under autocratic regimes, which is the highest number since 1978. A defining and often overlooked feature of the global resurgence in authoritarianism is the organized transnational effort to roll back women's rights. This is in part due to the link between women's rights and democracy. From the global suffrage movement, led by women at the end of the 19th century and the first half of the 20th century, to the leadership at the forefront of the Arab Spring uprisings in the early 2000s, women's political and civil participation is strongly correlated with democratic movements. So consequently, autocratic leaders often seek to marginalize women's rights and roles in the public sphere in an effort to squash support for democracy. It's also not an accident that attempts to constrain the power of women are often features of autocracies. Russia and Hungary, for example, have promoted pronatalist policies to incentivize women to assume unpaid caretaking roles. I know, sounds familiar. Poland has one of the world's most restrictive abortion laws, also feeling quite familiar. Attacks on women's rights, particularly reproductive rights, are a tool of illiberal leaders. So given the strong link between authoritarianism and the backlash against women's equality, investing in efforts to safeguard democracy and human rights is an essential priority. And conversely, attacking misogyny and gender discrimination is key to democratic resilience. Governments, multilateral organizations, and philanthropy should address the link between women's activism and pro-democracy efforts by prioritizing efforts in women's rights defenders and women's movements on the front lines, and by supporting the international bodies that are critical to promoting and advancing women's human rights. Second, in our report, we emphasize the importance of closing gender gaps in technology, including those related to women's access, safety, and participation in science, technology, engineering, and math, which is critical to advancing women's equality. As the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action recognize, technology is a double-edged sword for women's rights and participation. On the one hand, technological advancements have provided significant opportunities for women's economic, civic, and political participation, but on the other hand, they've given rise to new forms of inequality, such as the gender-digital divide, the underrepresentation of women in STEM fields, and the rise of technology-facilitated gender-based violence, a real new 21st century form of violence against women. To promote equality in this tech-driven era, it's essential to close the gaps in technology, including by eliminating this gender divide, improving women's representation in the tech sector, and addressing online harassment and abuse. Promising models already exist. There have been commitments from the G20 to cut the gender-digital divide in half by 2030, online safety laws that provide recourse to survivors and require technology companies to take preventive action, and international and national frameworks, such as the Global Digital Compact and the European Union's AI Act, that ensure that new and emerging technologies advance women's equality rather than undermine it. Third, advancing women's economic participation is critical to achieving equality in the modern era. 30 years after Beijing, women's labor force participation has remained largely stagnant. Women also continue to be underrepresented in leadership positions, occupying only 11% of Fortune 500 CEO positions. One reason for the persistent global gap in economic participation is legal barriers that continue to restrict women's equal access to employment, to property ownership, and credit. And in addition, women lag behind in economic participation because of structural barriers, including the disproportionate share of household and unpaid care work, including childcare, elder care, and care for the sick or disabled. Women also disproportionately lack access to modern digital financial systems, which further inhibits their economic participation in an increasingly wired economy. The underrepresentation of women in the 21st century economy not only fuels economic insecurity for women and families, but of course undermines economic growth for entire communities, economies, and nations. To accelerate women's economic participation, nations have to start by repealing discriminatory laws to level the economic playing field, such as restrictions that preventing women from holding employment in certain sectors, to invest in and strengthen the care infrastructure so that women can help women balance care responsibilities, and work with the private sector and philanthropy to increase support for digital innovation through fintech, for example, which can help close gaps in financial inclusion. Fourth, addressing gender gaps in conflict and climate response is essential to advancing the full participation of women and girls. In the modern era, the number of global conflicts is surging. Over the past 5 years alone, the number of global conflicts has nearly doubled. Moreover, as the climate crisis intensifies, climate change is increasingly considered a threat multiplier, imperiling health, economic security, and stability, and rendering societies more vulnerable to conflict or relapses to violence. Research confirms that conflict and crisis pose unique and disproportionate risks to women and girls. The connection between conflict and gender-based violence is indisputable, and as conflict spreads, more women are forced into migration, which in turn creates risks of trafficking, exploitation, and violence. Similarly, climate change poses particular threats to women and girls. Women and children are 14 times more likely than men to die from extreme weather disasters, and women and girls account for 4 of 5 people displaced by climate change. Notwithstanding the risks that conflict and climate change pose to women and girls, women still remain dramatically underrepresented in crisis and conflict resolution processes, as well as in climate diplomacy. Moreover, climate finance initiatives often fail to track the proportion of dollars that even go to women, thereby creating gaps in women's access to capital that are endemic in other sectors. To advance equality in a time of rising crises, international institutions, national governments, and their partners must address persistent gender gaps in conflict and climate responses, including by advancing commitments to women, peace, and security at the national level, including women in climate mitigation and adaptation strategies, addressing the underrepresentation of women in climate governance structures, and setting targets to close the gap in women's access to climate finance. So those are 4 big priorities, and we have a few suggestions in our report about how to do this. We identify 4 key levers. First, resources. Resources for gender equality, already severely constrained, are being cut dramatically in the United States, but also around the world. So to tackle these 21st century challenges and to really accelerate, finally, the pace of change, we need to pursue innovative financing to help close these significant funding gaps at a time of contracting resources. And I don't have time to tell you about it today, but there are innovative financing models, some of which are being tried. Second, we need to reform institutions to close persistent gender gaps in leadership, and importantly, to increase political will at the state, national, and international levels, in governments and multilateral organizations, in philanthropy and nonprofit organizations, and finally in the private sector. Third, we need to expand and support coalitions advocating for women's rights and countering this growing backlash across like-minded governments and also sectors. And you don't need to do anything other than listen to the last 2 panels to really make clear that really what we need to do is stay out of women's ways. And fourth, exactly. And fourth, and this sounds wonky, but it's really important, we need to invest in data collection and research to strengthen statistical systems and analysis. And right now, again, in our country, those are being pulled back, pulled away, and as well as in other countries around the world. And in order to make really good policy choices and make our investment, our resource investment, the most effective that it can be. So with all of that said, it's hard sometimes to feel hopeful in this moment, and for sure this report shows that there has been real regression at worst and inadequate progress at best. However, the report also shows that we know what to do, that progress is possible, and that investing in women and girls, particularly the next generation of emerging leaders, removing barriers in their path, is the key for a better future, by the way, not only for women and girls, but for everyone, for communities and for countries. Thank you.
So just remember Jen Klein, because Jen Klein, I mean, the work that she does for presidents and presidents and presidents, it's just incredible. We're so lucky to have her. So listen, we have a very important last conversation, which affects every single woman in this room, every single person in this room. And that is about the future of women's health, the issues and challenges and opportunities that we face. And I know that I am very excited to hear from our last conversation before we go to an amazing reception that I hope you will stay for. So moderating our conversation is Vanessa Cheris, Director of Company Communications at P&G. And I just have to say, P&G has been one of the most extraordinary and lasting partners of All In Together for many, many years. We are deeply grateful for their partnership and their support. And so we're thrilled to welcome Vanessa. Also a longtime friend and supporter of All In Together, Kalahn Taylor-Clark, who's Vice President and Head of Social Impact at Merck. Merck has been a longtime supporter, but Kalahn has supported us like at 2 different companies. So she gets a win for that. It's not even just this job, it's the job before too. So they just come back to us, which is so wonderful. And then last but absolutely not least, actually with some of the most, I think, important context, is Chanel Porchia-Albert, who's CEO and founder of Ancient Song, which does just absolutely incredible maternal health work across this country, Please join me in welcoming them for this last but very, very important conversation.
Hello. Hi, everybody. We made it to the end. We're supposed to have 20 minutes, but we have 15, and so we're going to try to move as quickly as possible, but still, you know, this is a very important conversation, and I think rightfully it is the final conversation of the day because, for me at least, when I think about the topic of healthcare, particularly women's health, it is the foundation of a lot of what we discussed today. And I was, you know, during the last session, it was very heavy, right? And so as I think about some of the things that the professor mentioned and just generally the times that we're in, it is very difficult to say the least, but what I take heart in are women like these who are doing amazing work, change makers, that are really driving forward change in the space of women's health for us. And so we don't have much time, but I want to read a little bit of your bios because I want to ground, you know, everyone in the conversation, the perspective that you're coming from. So first, Dr. Kalahn Taylor-Clark. You heard her title, Vice President and Head of Social Impact and Sustainability at Merck. She has a massive portfolio underneath her, Merck Foundation, Merck for Mothers, the Donations Program, the US Patient Assistance Program, the Employee Giving, and the Merck Impact Venture Fund. She is also an academic currently at, Johns Hopkins Carey School of Business, and public health by training, and worked in that space for a number of years before moving to private sector. And then Chanel Porchia-Albert is a leading health policy advocate, has advised institutions, policymakers on the state and federal level, recently appointed to a 4-year post with the US Commission on Civil Rights for New Jersey, yay Jersey. And also the founder and president of Ancient Song, as you mentioned, which is an organization that provides doula services, doula trainings, and trains in community, focused on communities of color, particularly low and middle income. So kind of jumping straight into the questions, I feel like we would be remiss if we didn't talk a little bit about social media and AI, right? You know, my mother has this habit of sending me Instagram posts and forwarding me things from WhatsApp that she's been forwarded probably 1,000+ times. And I spend so much time trying to explain to her, like, what is real, what is not. Just because someone's wearing a lab coat does not make them a doctor. How to then double click and ask yourself, like, what might be the motivation behind this post? How to go and look certain things up. And it's work, to say the least. And it's not just my mom, right? Many women, many people are getting health advice from social media and sources with no science or medical background. And so I would love to start with you, Chanel, if you can talk a bit about, you know, as someone who works with families and in community, how are you sharing trusted information with them? And then also, how can we think about, you know, how we can talk to other folks about how they can protect themselves from mis and disinformation in the medical space?
All right, greetings everyone, how are you? Ooh, come on, give me another one. Greetings everyone, how y'all doing? All right. So it's a pleasure to be here this evening and be in conversation with you all. So I will say, social media, you know, I think all of us love a good meme, right? Some otters that come to us, right, on our feed, you know what I mean? Moments of joy, you know, maybe a good vegan recipe. I'm speaking for myself. But then there's also those videos that we get randomly, right? Where we're like, as you said, questioning, where is this coming from, right? So for instance, Tylenol in pregnancy, right? Look, everybody's like, oh, child. Right? And I know as someone who works within reproductive health care, after, you know, the announcement was made in regards to Tylenol in pregnancy, we got an overload of calls and texts from, you know, pregnant and parenting individuals who were like, so wait a minute, I just took Tylenol, does that mean I can't take that now? And really having to go and provide evidence-based information and and really reduce their fears, right? Because now a lot of fear and anxiety is building up. I will say this, I said, in a place where, we have people vying for our attention every 5 seconds, right? Where we have information overload, it's really, really important for us to kind of decipher what's important and what's not important. And I think a lot of that is based on stepping away from social media and going back to the trusted sources that we know that we have relied on for so many years, right? So Black Women's Health Imperative is one of them, right? Looking at In Our Own Voice is another one. The CDC, right? Looking at Johns Hopkins University and, trusted scholars that we know who have been around, who have continuously provided us, good content as well as information that we can use. I've been speaking to city officials here in New York City and really saying, we're living in a space where people are afraid. And every time they turn around, they're hearing something new. And so what does it mean for us to, as a city and as a state, really create our own blue check mark of information? A space where we're saying we have community-based organizations that are trusted, we have institutions that we know we can rely on, we have the state health department, we have the city health department, but we all come together as this coalition of information to really disseminate it in ways that are effective, ways that are trusted, especially from a community-based perspective, because the place that people are going to go to first is community, right? They're not going to, the larger healthcare institution to ask for information. They're going to go to their friend. They're going to go to the doula that they had that supported them through their birth. So really, let's look at how we as individuals, but also as community members, can be a network of support of really gathering resources and organizing them, right? And saying, hey, this is how we're going to put it together so we can avoid these mishaps, right? And this disinformation that's coming at us. Yeah.
And then you mentioned BWHI, Black Women's Health Imperative, which has been a longtime partner of P&G, and our Tampax and Always brand has worked with them. And I think it's a wonderful segue. I'm going to kind of switch the order a bit to talk about the private sector. Right? And so it's not a surprise to many people in the room, right? The dollars are moving very different nowadays, whether it's reduction or cuts, not just from public sector, but then also even private sector shifting. I consider myself fortunate to be a part of an organization that has stayed the course and remained committed to doing work in the community and then also in equality and inclusion, right? And we have brands that do the same, but not all organizations do that. When we spoke, I know your remit is very expansive at Merck, and you all similarly have, not even just stayed the course, but sounds like you've doubled down. And so I would love for you to talk a bit about, what role do you think, broadly, private sector can play in times like this? And then also if you can add some specificity and talk to the folks who are executive level or even entry level in their organizations and their companies, what they can do internally.
Yeah, no, thank you very much. It's really a challenging time right now, of course, for the private sector, and of course for someone like myself talking in public about these issues, right? I'm going to be as real as I possibly can be. We are staying the course. We are not keeping our eyes off the prize. And the prize is to ensure that everyone that needs our medicines is able to get our medicines. And in order to do that, we have to do the best science. We have to bring every body, literal body, into our research. And we have to make sure that post-market, we're reaching all of the people we need to reach. So in my mind, that's why we stay the course. In the mind of our company, I will tell you, it's been fascinating. Because we do a lot of social impact work, I am leading the grant making for the company, both in the United States as well as globally. Last year, or 2 years ago, we had 45 applicants for grants. This year, we had 147 globally. So what did that mean? I went to the team and I said, we can't not do something. USAID has been cut, but so have many others, family philanthropies and others. And so what we decided to do is double our grant making. We doubled it in Africa, we increased it in Asia, we increased it in Latin America. the fact that I was able to be given the autonomy to do that, but also the support to do that by my company spoke volumes to me about why I'm there. But I would also say that this is an opportunity for those who are in executive spaces to be leaning in. You know, this is our time now. I've seen this, frankly, as an opportunity. I've always seen in my career where I thought government was going to be falling out of a lot of the social impact work that we really needed, especially when it came to Black women and Black women's health. And so this is the opportunity that I see and that I'm able to actually capitalize on, no pun intended, in terms of going to those partners that will always be our partners, global public health stakeholders, women's groups, and others. It's really important to us, especially in the Merck for Mothers program, which is a $650 million public-private partnership. You know, we've touched more than 34 million women since the inception of this program. We're going to keep going. We're not stopping. And the idea that we can actually lean in and double down is actually going to show us on the right side of history when this is all said and done.
Yeah, I just want to add to that too. You know, just in the state that we are in right now, you know, Black women are 9 to 12 times more likely to die or suffer a near miss, right, from a pregnancy-related complication. And as a community-based organization, you know, we've we've sailed the tides before and seen how how I'm just gonna say funders because my tongue is tied. How funders have previously weren't in the space, weren't talking about Black maternal health, weren't having a conversation around why it was important to invest, right, in our communities and in our healthcare, and in particular in our reproductive healthcare. And when the conversation really started coming up, you had Black Mamas Matter Alliance, who was pivotal in that role. You have Ancient Song, you have Mama Total Village in DC, and a whole host of us who have really been at the forefront to really bring the conversation to light. So to see it be in a place where it is right now is really disheartening, but it's also, as you said, it's not surprising. Right? And a lot of us have prepared for this in some ways, but in other ways, strategically, we find ourselves in disarray where we're all trying to vie for the same pot of money. So because of the fact that funders have said, oh, we're shifting our priorities, or oh, we're no longer funding Black maternal health, oh, reproductive justice is, you know, not in our portfolio now. You know, you find now, as you said, you know, this globally, right? You went from 47 to 100 plus. Think about the US, right? And the Black maternal health organizations that are focused. There's not that many of us, but all of us are vying for that same pot of money and that same funding, writing grants, not getting answers back. You know, I recently wrote a grant. And there was, I was told by the organization that we're sorry, but also we've received 750 applicants. And we have never received this many people trying to get money from the large and smaller institutions. So where you see, you know, healthcare clinics across the city are closing down, where we see our workforce, our infrastructure for reproductive health, we have a shortage of midwives, we have a shortage of nurses, we have a shortage of physicians, we have healthcare institutions closing. We find ourselves where people have disinformation, no information. They don't have access to healthcare. We have people who are coming out of state to try to access healthcare. It's really the time where you as funders really need to say, okay, I'm gonna double down. I'm going to invest in the next generation. I'm going to invest in this generation because everything starts with women.
Yeah. Well, and to that point, and on the funder side, I completely agree with you, and I'm grateful that I get to be one of those funders that's doubling down. But on the organizational side, you know, before I started this role, I was an advisor to the Black Women's Health Imperative, as you know, and to In Our Own Voice and others, writing their strategic plans. And I would say to them, I need you all to work together. You know, you have $1 million to $3 million operating budgets annually. No offense, but Planned Parenthood, one pillar of that would crush all of you together. And I don't mean that negatively. I don't want to pit people against each other. But what I want to do is recognize that we are at a time right now that it's really important that we take collective action, that groups take collective action, that we're no longer seeing ourselves as, well, I'm over here and you're over there, and so we shouldn't be working together. Now is the time to coordinate and to be collective. When I'm looking at grants, or when my team is looking at grants, that's what they're going to be seeing. They're going to say, oh, well, is Sister Song along with blah, 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 along with da-da, are they actually creating a coalition that we could invest in as opposed to one-off, one-off, one-off? And frankly, if I'm giving you one-off, 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 I can't give you more than 25% of your operating budget. So it behooves us all to come together and ask for more. I don't tell them I said that. Oh, I'm on video, okay. But it behooves them to think much more holistically and coordinated if you really want to get through a period where the funding has come down.
I know we're at time, but just on this last note, I love that we're ending on collective action. And to my question too, on for those of you all that might be at a level in your organization where you feel like you don't have power, I feel like one of the themes that we ran through over and over together today is how much agency we do have, right? So I think I was in my second or third year at P&G, and to a point about seeing opportunity and going after it, like me and another group of women helped started their maternal health equity program that was focused on, like, we were very much corralled around the statistic that Black women disproportionately die, right, from childbearing than any other race in the US. Until this day, right, it's been 5 years, the program is still going strong without me there because the brand has committed to doing it, and because they made a commitment, they have to see it through. So I would say wherever you are in your organization, just keep that in mind that you do have agency and you could put pressure and encourage the people where you are to do more and to be consistent about their actions.
Yeah, I just want to leave with just to add on to that bit of hope, right? Because we need glimmers of hope. Is you all are champions. You all are leaders in your own right. And organizations and mothers, I'm a mother of 6 children. Yeah, I see people like, wow, yes. It's okay, you can say that, I'm here.
She's alive.
And I look great.
You look fabulous.
I'm dressed.
Yes, you do.
It is the same way mothers, we will get up at the crack of dawn. We will cook breakfast, we will make lunches, we will brush teeth, we will change diapers, we will wipe the snot out of your nose, child. We will do all of the things. We will check on you during the day, we will drop off your homework in the afternoon. We will take you to Color Guard late in the evening and then make sure that you have brownies the next day. The same way we have that level of dedication as parents for our children is the same way we need to have that same level of dedication to one another. Mm-hmm. Right? Because each one of us are an auntie, we're a cousin, we're a mother. We are someone raised us, someone held us. We had our Nana's hands, our grandma's hands. We had someone to enrich us. And we have to take up arms to enrich each other. We have to take up arms to say, I'm going to nourish you. I am going to feed your soul. And it's not the nourishment that comes from, always having to give something in a monetary way, because yes, money is important. But I also want us to think about the fact that we need each other right now, because there's a concerted effort to have us against each other. Yeah. To other one another, to make us feel like, oh, well, I can't do anything. And as someone who my organization started in my house, in my living room, and it started from a desire of wanting to be around women, to connect. And so I opened up my home, I fed people with what I had in my kitchen, because everything starts over a meal, right? Everybody know, I see the people shaking their head. Everything starts over a good meal. But we need to feed each other. We need to feed our souls. We need to take the opportunity. So don't be afraid. Yep. So when I say you're a leader and you're a champion, you are. In your organization, it only takes one second for you to say something, for you to do something. It only takes 1 second for you to see someone, to look them in the eye and be like, I know, I feel you, right? But we got this, and we have each other.
Yeah, and I would just note that the soon-to-be mayor of Albany just said it perfectly. They're not going to find you, you find yourself, but I'm here. I've got a vice president of color back there at Merck. We are all here so that we can support you, that we can bring you up. So those of you who are not executives yet, those of you who are starting your way in the space, know that we're here and we're open. We are not shut down. Just because I'm sitting on the stage or we're here doing this, we are human beings just like everybody else, and we want you to come. We want you to speak to us. We want you to tell us what your dreams are, and we hope that we can help guide you. So for those of you in here that are feeling that, just know, this is what you are the ones we've been waiting for, so come on.
Yes. Wow, thank you. Because we have been called to feed one another.
And drink with one another.
And also I'm Jewish and I have to have a meal. It's just a thing, we have to feed you. We will feed you. We would love for you to stay and join us upstairs for the reception to spend a little bit more time with each other. Before I let you go, please take a minute to join me in thanking the incredible staff of All In Together, Jill Valenti, Priya Alangavan, and Emily Prendergast, as well as our amazing social media team. We are small but mighty, but we made this very special day happen. I'm overwhelmed with all of what has come today. I was thinking about, they try to bury us, but they do not know that we are the seeds that grow. There were a lot of extraordinary moments like that will stay with me. This day was meant to scratch the surface of a lot of incredibly important conversations. I hope they inspire you to go deeper on the things that speak most to you, and then to find ways to take action in whatever way you can. We all, I know, one of the great truths about the work that we've been doing over these 11 years, 12 years, is that everywhere we go, every conversation we hear the same thing from women. I just want to make the world better for my daughters and my sons and my sisters and my mothers. And that is what is so extraordinary about these moments of opportunity and this time that we get together, which is to join hands, to support each other, to look each other in the eye, as so many of the women here did today, and say, we are the ones that you have been looking for. Thank you all so much for being with us. Please stay to eat.